All right, welcome everyone to the Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, January 29th, 2019. As always, this meeting is being video recorded, and we'll begin with a moment of appreciation for our troops serving in the Middle East and around the world. Thank you. It is 7:05, so we have our first appointment, James Goldstein, Michael Taylor, Christian Donner, to discuss the Mass Trails Grant Program application. I'd like to come up to the lectern, please. Christian, welcome back.
Thank you. Frequent visitor. So what I'm handing you here is a draft copy of the grant application that we are working on still. So there are still some minor edits being made to this document, and it is due on Friday. So we're trying to get this out this week. And I'm here to ask for your approval that we, or on behalf of the town, that we can submit the grant application for the Mass Trails 2019 round of grants. This is the same program, rebranded, that we applied for last year, where we got the $100,000 for. We are hearing that it is well funded again this year, and preliminary conversations were, even though we just got some money from them, there is some chance that we will get some more. It's not clear if we get everything that we'll ask for, and what the chances actually are, but we try to do our best in gathering support letters. I just sent Christine an email earlier, and we have support letters from the Conservation Commission already. I talked to Roberta Lynch today. Not sure if we'll get one from the Council on Aging. I left a message for the folks at the Kingsbury Club, and which we know are very supportive. And so we're working all these channels. So in terms of going through the details of the document, I'm happy to do that. I hope we won't have to. It's pretty much boilerplate. It's very much the same what we submitted last year, with two differences. The first one is that we have since, as we just talked about 2 weeks ago, about the fundraising progress. We've raised about $60,000 ourselves, which would be sufficient for the match that is required. And we're independently working on lowering the soft costs for permitting and engineering, because there is a possibility that we don't need to go through the full extent of the or the worst case scenario that was basically in the Beals and Thomas estimate. So we are trying to lower the cost of the project by not requiring detailed designs, and we have some money raised in the meantime. So by applying for another $100,000, we would close the funding gap to all but about $20,000, which we think we can raise in the next year and a half or so to get to where we need to be.
All right, any questions, Pete?
First of all, I just picked up the Medfield Foundation mail. There's mail for you here that you can pick up. One of them appears to be a check, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Again, on the match issue, the town is required to match 80%. Is that what it says in here?
20%.
20%.
Yes. So to get the $100,000, the town has to match $20,000.
Okay, and then we can do that with in-kind services, I think is what
we can do that with in-kind services through the DPW, for example.
Yeah, okay.
Always in the back there. Or through money that the Medfield Foundation or the Bay Colony Rail Trail Association donates to the town for the purpose of constructing a trail. So all of that will count.
So the private fundraising counts towards the match?
Will count, yes.
So is that why under 2.6 it says matching amount committed $80,000? That includes your fundraising then? Yep, okay. All right, those are all my questions. Thank you.
I'm doing this off the top of my head. When you made your presentation at a meeting or two ago. For some reason, it stuck in my head that the total cost that was reflected in that was something upwards of 300,000.
Yes.
I could be wrong, but it was more than that. What's the difference between the 280 here and that 300?
I'll defer that to James, who puts the numbers together.
If I may.
Sure.
Please, you just actually grab a microphone or displace Christian from behind the mic.
Sorry. Christian mentioned the soft costs, which would be for more detailed design documents than the conceptual planning and design report that Bills and Thomas did. That comes to $80,000, and that is what we're attempting to avoid and to work off of the conceptual planning and design documents.
Okay.
The Conservation Commission is okay with it. We're waiting to hear from MBTA to see if they're okay with it.
Okay, so that 80,000 is not this 80,000, that's 80,000.
No.
That's where I had the number over 300,000. Okay, okay.
So we would need around 80,000. We've raised 60.
Yeah,
It leaves
yeah.
about 20.
Okay, okay.
Any other questions?
I have nothing else either.
Okay.
That- Ready for a motion?
Do you need, you're looking for approval to submit the grant application?
Yes.
Okay.
So I move that the selectmen approve or authorize the submission of the grant application for the rail trail project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It looks like we don't have to sign it, so
Sarah will work with us on that, so.
our work here is done, thank you. All right,
Actually, one thing, I think there actually may be a signature page, if you want to authorize me to sign it when Sarah completes it, just that'll move things along quicker, because I know it is due Friday.
I move to amend my prior motion to authorize Christine to sign whatever paperwork is required to document our approval of the submission of this fund.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Christian, thank you, James. All right, that's our only scheduled appointment, but I see that both Chief Wilhelmy and Mo Goulet are here, so let's take Chief Wilhelmy next to discuss a grant application for E911 training. And welcome.
Good evening. This is an application that we do every year to try to help pay for the training for our dispatchers and officers. They're all required to be trained in emergency medical dispatch, so the state puts out 911 grants every year. And this is also due Friday. So I would request it, if you could sign that, we could get it in and hopefully save the town a little bit of money. Questions?
We've done this before. in the
Yeah,
past.
I think Chief Meany has done it pretty much every year. We've tried to get it in every year to help out.
My only question is anyone here a notary? Does this has to be notarized?
Requires a notary on the last page.
Evelyn notarizes your signatures in the morning.
Okay, well, I'll come by and she can do it tomorrow.
Yep.
At some point. It won't be in the.
Just one signature?
Just
yours?
one, it looks like it's just one signature. So I can come by, it won't be in the morning, but I can try to get here tomorrow at some point.
Perfect.
To notarize it, but that's my only question.
Okay.
We have a motion?
I move that we approve the police department submitting a grant for the emergency dispatch training.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Chief? All right, main topic for discussion tonight is our ongoing fiscal 2020 budget review.
Mokulé?
Yes, well, I'm gonna go to Mo first on both.
Okay.
And so I thought we would start, since we were gonna talk to Mo Goulet about his budgets and also your DEP approval of surface water discharge permit. We'll kind of get into that portion of the discussion, so you don't have to get up twice.
Great. What would you like to start off with?
Let's start off with the DEP approval of the surface water discharge permit.
Okay. So last year, we had a consent order at the wastewater treatment plant from DEP regarding phosphorus levels that exceeded the limits. So we met with DEP quite a few times. They came with, this is a compliance letter, things that we need to do to comply with the consent order. There's 8 different action items on here. Most of them are already in the works. There's 2 that are completed. And the last, number 8, does show that they mandate a new position at the wastewater treatment plant. So that's one of the stipulations, and I do have that in my budget request.
In our packet, we only had the first page of this, not the second.
That's on, it was double-sided, so.
Figured that's probably what it was.
So.
I have one copy here that has the second
Pete
page.
and I can look on, I assume we have the same issue.
We do feel confident we can hit every one of these compliance issues. We met with DEP. They gave us the opportunity to discuss the dates, the deadline dates, and we feel comfortable with everything that's on there.
And is the additional employee, is that position in the new budget, or have you already hired that person?
That's in the new budget.
It's in the new budget.
And what's the thinking of DEP that we need this employee that we didn't have before?
So back in 2009, Margot Weber from DEP, who was head of the wastewater at that particular time, the town had conducted some studies that showed that it revealed that through our operation and maintenance manual, that we should have 4.68 employees at the wastewater treatment plant to run that facility for the amount of services that we do there. We, in 2016, we lost our chief operator, and we ended up with 3 full-timers. So we were short on labor there. They've been pushing for us to get more and more employees. Last year, in February, we hired a consultant that gave us 25 hours a week, which was 0.61, if you will, persons down there. So we were with 3.61. We're still short a full-timer. They feel
Is
that
that the same person that we approved the contract for
Correct.
a month or so ago?
correct.
Okay.
And so with this consent order, it brought up that they felt that it was directly correlated to the lack of, we need more maintenance down there, that the phosphorus levels could be affected by not having enough maintenance down there. Algae, things that need to be done more often. So with this consent order, they are mandating us. Since 2009, nothing was done to accommodate the 4.68 personnel. So they're asking, now they're telling us that we need to have another full-timer in that position.
Pete, other questions?
I guess the other thing that I was curious about was, there was something about moving where the chemicals are inserted. What's that about?
Right, so part of my budget as well is asking for additional monies for chemicals. We're using more chemicals because we're putting in more strategic points along the way to accommodate for the phosphorus levels. So with that, it is helping. We are improving our system down there. So that's why right now we're about 88% through our chemical budget line item. So that's in the new budget as well.
But there was something about the injection site for the chemicals being moved
Right.
too.
It's being moved, but it's also being added into different locations around the treatment plant to accommodate once different treatments have been.
All right, so these are all just to deal with the phosphorus,
Correct.
phosphates levels, okay.
Yes.
That's it for me. Thank you.
So my questions have nothing to do with whether or not it approved this, just trying to
Sure.
learn something. This wastewater, is this treated water that we have a phosphorus problem with, or is it surface water that brings phosphorus in? or-
Both.
So it's both?
Both.
And this is just me trying to visualize something I know nothing about. The movement was toward, I think, an influent, which sounded to me like it was an upstream kind of thing, almost like pre-treatment, or?
So basically, at our wastewater treatment plant, we take all the flows from all the residents. But we do have what they call I&I issues, which is inflow and infiltration. So it
Okay.
comes in through the pipes, leaks. It's not a tight system, and
Right.
every treatment plant has those issues. So you try to take care of those issues. But when you have a high groundwater or enormous rains, which we had over the course of the fall and winter, those flows come into the treatment plant. Now we're treating more than we should, but it brings in more influent that has more phosphorus.
Okay. I was trying to figure out, I was trying to see whether there's a connection between when you have surface water where people use lots of fertilizer, you get lots of phosphorus, and that creates
It's
problems?
not a
Is it that
drainage,
kind-
it's not the
it's
drainage
that kind of
system,
thing?
it's
Okay.
supposed to be a tight sewer system, but like I said, you know, the infrastructure needs to be improved,
Okay.
you know, in many parts of the country, and we're just feeling that crunch right now.
Okay.
But we're making strides, and we are improving the.
Isn't the phosphates a fertilizer issue primarily?
It could be a lot of different things, but, you know, it could be coming from sumps, it could be coming from different areas of the town, but, you know, we can control it, it's just, we have to do a little more research and understanding. With the consultant that we have, like I said, we made some good improvements to take care of those issues.
How about the issue of the operator? I know that we were looking for an operator, couldn't find one, so we've hired Weston and Sampson, is it, to run it for us?
Yeah, so the last meeting I had with DEP, I did explain to them that, you know, I'd rather not be looking for, what I've heard in the market, there's not a good influx of chief operators out there, and I would hate to settle for someone and have to learn the process all over. Like I said, we're making strides right now with the consultant. I'd like to keep that for a while until we get our wastewater treatment plant under control, and then maybe look at hiring a full-timer, and they agreed, so.
Okay. And how long do you think that's gonna be before you're gonna be looking for a full-time operator then?
I'm not sure, but, you know, it's kind of, it ain't broke, don't fix it attitude. I just, unless there's some good talent out in the market, I don't see that right now, and it's, when you look at all the job descriptions out there and a lot of people looking for people in the industry, there's not a lot out there right now.
I think we signed, it was a 3-year contract, wasn't it?
It's a 1 year with
Well, it's 1
with
year.
a renewal, yeah.
3-year renewal.
Yeah.
It is, I think at the time, when I looked at it, the cost of doing that is probably not significantly different
It's
than if
about,
we'd
it's about
hired
the
them.
same as hiring a full-timer.
That's what I thought,
Yeah.
okay.
So there's no action item for us, this is just an update.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Great, well, thank you.
You can have this back.
You want to talk budgets now, Bo?
Sure. So mainly on certain budget line items, if we start with the sewer one at first, one of them is the new position that we're looking for, that DEP is mandating us to do.
All right, give us a second here to,
Sure. Might be at the back end.
Which budget are you starting with, Mo?
the sewer,
The sewer budget?
there's water.
Take it to the next series, that's the water. It's up top tab. One of the tabs at the top, you gotta go in.
Sewer,
Oh.
it's right above better.
I've got nothing there.
No, I looked at it.
Maybe after him.
That's why I emailed them, because I knew you wouldn't have all of
Yeah,
them.
I should have printed them then,
Next after
okay.
animal control.
We can, if you leave your book, I can fill it tonight for you.
You can start, and I'll flip through this here.
So, one of the main ones is the new position. I think it's a needed position down there. I think it would help what we're doing down there. Like I said, we're making good strides, and I would hate to take 2 steps forward and 4 steps backwards. So, I think we're going in the right direction. This is a mandate from DEP, so if you say no, then I have to do a lot of explaining to DEP. We talked a little bit about the sewer chemicals. We have different strategic points that we're adding the chemicals to help contain the phosphorus levels, and so that's what that addition is. And the only other one that's a little bit to understand is adding money for electricity costs. Last year, we cut the budget down because we had a 35–40% decrease in electricity use because of the solar panels down at the wastewater treatment plant. The Water and Sewer Board wanted to show that, that efficiency, so we cut the budget down, not realizing that the costs still need to be paid up front. We do get SRECs, or energy credits, but those don't come in till after the fact, and by the time they come in, they show up as revenue. It's a little bit of an accounting issue, but it doesn't go back into the bottom line of the operating budget. So I do show a negative balance, but it does get reimbursed, so to speak, at the end. But it's the way it comes in does not give me, it will give me a negative balance. So I do need to pay the electricity costs up front. The revenues will show, and it'll be a wash at the end of the year. When the revenues come in.
Well, Pete, you have a question?
I guess the electricity was the question that I had, and I'm still not understanding actually, because is it gonna be that this is just a 1-year infusion, and then it'll be?
No, because I need to, so the electricity, I still have to pay the electricity costs up front. So even though we have a cost savings, we don't see those savings until the energy credits come available.
Yeah.
The energy credits come after the fact.
But when the energy credits come in, why don't those sort of negate out the 18,000?
It will, but it won't show by July 1st when the budgets are due.
This isn't a net metering situation. You pay for all the power, and then you get credit.
Then we get credit and reimburse, but it reimburses
It's a
as
timing
revenue. It doesn't go back into the line item.
But I would think that it's only a 1-year infusion of the 18,000 then, because you're getting the 18,000 on the back end back.
It goes to the general fund.
Oh,
That was my next one.
Yeah.
It goes to the general fund.
It's going to the general fund.
yeah,
Okay.
all right.
So-
That answers that question.
I'll forward you the memo from accounting regarding that, because they sent one
It's
to
a
the
long
warrant
memo.
committee. It's a very long memo.
So the question I had around that was, this is almost like the ambulance fee sort of thing we've had with the fire department over the years. You're incurring $18,000 in added electricity costs beyond what we had planned for. That the ESREC is expected to cover the full amount of that, or is it a?
Full amount, probably then some, because
Oh, okay.
I did cut last year more than 18,000 out of the budget, which I shouldn't have, but I did to show the benefit that the solar panels were doing.
So not that I'm trying to totally nickel and dime this, my question then is, but I'm looking from a Prop 2.5 limit standpoint. We're adding $18,000 of the cost on a budget, but that is for a purpose that's generating revenues that either will completely offset or even more than offset that
Correct.
cost. Have we picked that up in the revenue side? And you may not know about this one particular thing.
I don't know
actually
about
thinking
that. I
the
have to
fact
talk to
that
Joy.
When we had talked yesterday and said
Yeah.
that Mike had bumped the revenues for water and sewer up to 4 million,
That
I'm
may
wondering
be
whether
what's-
that's
yeah.
part of the,
Let me check with Joy about that, but I know her main concern is that the amount of electricity has to be appropriated in the budget.
Yeah.
Before that
but
can come
that's
back.
an,
Yeah.
my point. This is an accounting question that we're dealing with, not a financial
No,
discipline
I'll
question.
ask her where she is.
Okay.
She's booking that.
Okay.
I mean, presumably this is funded by the enterprise fund
Correct.
in the first instance, but then for whatever reason, from an accounting standpoint, it becomes revenue to the town.
Well, that gets interesting. So the water and,
Yeah.
you're generating
Double check Matt's memo.
general revenue, the enterprise fund is generating revenues which go to the general fund or go back to the enterprise fund?
Let me check Matt's memo to us.
It
on
will go back to the enterprise fund
Enterprise
as
fund.
revenue.
It goes to the enterprise fund, is right? That makes sense to me.
Right.
Because otherwise, you're
Yes.
spinning off income from the enterprise fund to throw it into the town and then setting rates. So that makes more sense to me that we do it that way. Okay, all right.
Okay.
And has this budget been reviewed with Water and Sewer Board?
It was on their agenda, they didn't get to it, so we are meeting in February 12th, and it should be on the agenda again.
Okay. Have they seen it at least?
They have.
And the personnel board
sewer
is, the
questions?
personnel board is meeting on Thursday, but they've been briefed on this and they don't see an issue where it's being mandated by DEP.
Yep, I'm good.
All right, where to next?
If we go to solid waste budget?
I think that was one of the ones that came through on the, yeah, I stuck it under highway. No, it's like, at least I thought I did.
Solid waste disposal?
Solid waste disposal. So originally with the budget, I was adding 20,000 for the contract service tipping fee, and that was for the recycling costs. Since then, I've been dealing with a consultant to look into different avenues to negotiate with one of our contractors, E.L. Harvey, who has been servicing our recycling for the last few years. I know, Jeremy here, we talked about this a little bit, but, the cost, the processing fee, right now, we get charged $60 a ton. It was $20, $22, then $24 a ton, now it's $60 a ton.
For the recycling.
For the recycling. That's just for the processing fee, not for transportation and the rest. As far as talking with, I don't know if you know Kessler, Mitch Kessler, been dealing with him, who's knows the market, knows all the commodities, everything that, very knowledgeable, been around for a long time. We're dealing with him, we're negotiating with E.L. Harvey at this time. We don't have any definite prices yet, but I'm hoping that we don't need to add the 20,000 at this point, but I can't say that for sure. He's still telling me that the market is trending towards $80 to $100 a ton in that section. If it was $80 a ton, that's what I was banking the $20,000 on to increase the tipping fee. If I can stay at $60 a ton or lower, well, then we would, be in good shape, and I wouldn't have to increase anything on the budget. So I'm still working with that. I'm hoping to get an answer in the next couple weeks, and see what we can do about that fee. Okay? We do have clean recyclables. We are single stream, so our recyclables are in pretty good shape compared to a lot of other cities and towns. E.L. Harvey recognizes that, so that's one of the reasons why we think we can negotiate a good price or the same price.
How is it that they can give us a better price? Is there like grades of recyclables, or is it just that it doesn't take them?
The thing
as
is,
hard to
if the
process?
cleaner your recyclables, the more chance they have to be able to get, to bring it over to China and have them accept it.
Okay,
China has strict policies right now that they're enforcing, that if their load has a certain percentage over what they expect, they can send the loads back, and now it costs companies like E.L. Harvey, Casella, Waste Management a lot more money.
okay.
And that's what's driving this. But, I know you think the market might be going down a little bit, but like I said, what Mitch has been telling me, it's uncertain.
Where does it end up if it doesn't get accepted?
Northern Pacific.
I don't know if it's, right? It'll get incinerated probably. Yeah.
Okay. All right, next.
The only other issue I have, or the only other increase I have, there's some transfers only because of vehicle maintenance. I want to see what we're spending in each division on our vehicle maintenance, and we didn't have one in our water and sewer. I started that last year, and I'm transferring more money as we get into different vehicle repairs. So
Is this the equipment repair and maintenance?
that's
budget?
there's nothing in the equipment repair. It's mostly in the water and the water and sewer vehicle and repair maintenance line item. The only other thing is the sidewalks. I asked for $5,000 more last year. It was $30,000 to $35,000. Now I'm asking for $5,000 additional. And the reason for that, we are trying to develop a program where we rehab and create new sidewalks every year. I don't want to take it out of the Chapter 90. I wanted to continue our pavement management program and really make that work. The sidewalks, we're looking to begin a new sidewalk project on Adams Street this year. I'm not saying how long we can do it or how far we can go, but that, and we look to rehab a lot of the subdivisions that are already in desperate need of rehabilitation. So I know I asked for 2 years in a row, but it's a necessary, especially with the increase in attention to the sidewalks in town. We want to make an honest effort to continue building new sidewalks, but also rehabbing the ones we have.
This is suspect if there's one issue that we've heard more from people in town about than any other, the close second is dog poop on
And
flooded
if-
fields.
And $40,000 isn't gonna go too far. So it's just a, kind of a supplement. But, you know, with the Chapter 90, when we do new roadways and rehab some roadways, we are putting the sidewalks in consideration as well, for those particular roadways.
Pete?
I think it's a good idea to be doing some sidewalks every year, so thank you for that. How did Adams Street rise to the top?
Try to make a connection to the other side of town, especially if the, you know, looking forward to the, you know, at the Medfield State Hospital, but really connecting it down to the center, down off of West Mill,
Yeah.
Ice House, getting some sort of connection to that side of town.
Yeah,
Right now, there is a partial sidewalk on Adams Street. It's a non-invasive sidewalk where there's not a lot of land, there's no land takings. We can get the sidewalk in. We can get something to connect to that side of town, and a lot of people on that street have been requesting over the years for a sidewalk in that area. So.
I just had the sense that a sidewalk would get more use if it went down Harding Street.
It still could connect to the Harding Street. Now, if you go down Harding Street from West Street, there's not a lot of houses on there.
No,
So,
but it would connect that northern neighborhood to the
right,
downtown
and
more
Adams Street
directly.
will connect to the West Mill that would get out to Harding Street.
Yeah,
We also don't have the right-of-ways on Harding Street. Right, Adams Street, we have a right-of-way all the way
Correct.
down to put it in. Right now at Harding Street, we don't have them, because most of it would be on people's lawns at this point.
well, I mean, the top part of Harding Street near Dover, Sherburne that's the area where it's really tough to put it in, but I would think that the area from Hospital Road to the town wouldn't be so tough on Harding.
Well, that would be in a later phase, going Harding Street. You're talking about past Hospital Road?
Well, there are two issues. One is Hospital Road to Dover along Harding, and that's the area where I think it's very difficult because the right-of-way is narrow and you'd have to do a lot of takings.
Right.
But I would think that from Harding Street, from Hospital Road to the downtown, that should be much easier.
There's not a lot of households right there.
No, they're not.
No, and we're trying to accommodate, not only getting a sidewalk over to that side of town, but also accommodating the households along the way.
Yeah, all right. So I guess my thinking on that is that if you want to funnel the neighborhoods from Marlin, Evergreen, that whole area to the downtown, they're more likely to go down Harding, I think, than they are to go down over to Adams.
You
That's
know,
just a guess,
Pete,
but,
I'm not sure it may be true for adults, certainly if when I walk downtown, I'll stay on Harding
I
Street.
think of it mainly as being for the kids.
Well, I mean, that's my point is, when I had kids that were small, I actually preferred, of course, there was no sidewalk there, so that's part of it, but I actually preferred having them take a right on West Mill, even without sidewalks, and going up Adams, partly because it's not a 40-mile-an-hour zone, and partly because the overall setup was not there. So if it's kids, I see that route as not being a particularly bad one. On the other hand, adults, pretty much for the most part, I think hazard Harding Street, unless they have some reason that they want to cut over.
And this is something that was brought to my attention for many people that were talking about it over the years, that this was a planned route.
It was just Ken Feeney's idea and Mike Sullivan's idea. I don't think anybody else planned it.
Okay.
I know that over
the
time,
feedback
the
of them.
selectmen have been asked to weigh in on different sidewalk priorities, and that
Yeah.
hasn't been one of the high ones,
Okay.
which is why I was asking about it.
Well, if you'd like to discuss it further, we can do that and, look into the possibility of Harding Street. I mean, we haven't broke ground or anything, but we are, over the years, Norfolk County engineers have surveyed that area for that particular purpose.
Yeah, well, it's not a bad idea to build it there, certainly. I know the little section of Dale Street over by Charles,
Right, the
the,
connection there, that's a
over
little
by
bit
the
different.
cemetery, there's a
That's a little bit of a
block
different
that
issue
we're
because
missing
of
there
the
that needs to
curve,
get built too,
Right.
but that's a
There's
difficult
a right-of-way
block.
issue, there's trees, there's the
Yep.
curve, it's a little more involved than just being able to put a sidewalk there.
Yeah, and then the Main Street up to Shaw's is another priority
One of
area, I
the
think.
things that I'm going to be doing is creating a document or a plan to show all the connections in towns, all the handicapped accessibilities that we do or do not have, and what connections that we do need. So that accessibility will be happening within the next couple of years, hopefully.
Oh,
So,
good.
show all the connections that we have and connections we should be looking at.
Yeah, great, that's a good idea.
Pete, I know this was an issue you brought up years ago, that we exchanged emails on. Once, you're not necessarily that you have it now, but is there a point in time when you'd actually have kind of prioritized list of where you're going to this point about should you do Harding or not? It's like, if you want to have a discussion, we can have a discussion about it, but I don't know that we're prepared to kind of figure out what the priority across the town would be.
Well, I think
anyway.
with the assessment of our sidewalk network and where our connections should be and where we should go, I think that's going to help.
So my
decide.
question was, would that ultimately translate into some sort of a prioritized list of where
Absolutely.
you think the sidewalks need to go in first?
Same as our
'Cause that would be
pavement-
the
same as our
time I
pavement
think we'd
management.
want
What's the
to
best-
talk about it, is to get that. I know that was something you'd asked for a long time ago.
Yeah, I think it would be good to get that sort of discussion about, and you need the cost figures to know, to be
Yep.
able to compare different routes. You need to know how much each route's gonna cost. And that's what's been lacking so far.
Right, it's kind of an ad hoc, right?
Yeah.
People complain
It has
about a
been.
lack of a sidewalk in one spot, and so, oh, well, that sounds usually a good idea. And very rarely is the response gonna be, well, that's a terrible idea, we'll go on a sidewalk, right? I mean, but we do have to kind of look at how much sidewalk you're getting for how much cost, right? In terms of how much cooperation you're getting from people whose lawns need to be paved, how much cooperation you're gonna get from them, what's it gonna cost, and then what is it replacing, right? How
And
dangerous is
then,
it?
Mike, I think you want to factor in the risk factor too, and that's where I would say that the area on Harding, from Hospital to Dover line, I think that's a terrible area, and there are a lot of kids in that neighborhood, and so I think there's a high risk there, so I think that area should move up despite the high cost and the difficulty of doing it.
Well, do you have anything else?
No, only to that one point, and this is only peripherally involved, but I actually think, Pete, when we get to a point where we have to deal with the Hospital Road, Harding Street intersection, that, if the hospital gets developed, even already, the traffic coming up Hospital Road in the mornings is, for whatever reason, noticeably higher than it used to be, but I have a feeling we're gonna wind up re-engineering that entire intersection one way or another, and if we do that, because part of the problem on that is
Possibly bringing
is
in
that
perpendicular.
it's a double curve on a downward slope, with banked, there's not a lot of room to walk, and then it gets really fun when there's bike riders there.
The state commissioned a traffic study for their 440-unit plan up at the state hospital. Rizzo Associates did it, and they said that both that intersection and the intersection of Harding and North should be T intersections.
Yeah. I keep looking at rotary roundabouts and going, could you fit one in there, because that would be
Yeah,
kind of cool.
I like little roundabouts.
If you get a microphone.
Sorry, I came in late, so you're talking about sidewalks, is that going to include West Mill Street so that from Ice House Road, we can walk safely, and if it's going to go up Harding? Because we tried to do a walking group back a couple years ago and using West Mill and then Harding and all that. It was like taking your life in your hands. It was horrible.
As I came in, I was explaining earlier that the Adams Street sidewalk was a plan to try to connect that area down there. So right now, we're thinking about doing something in-house on Adams Street, heading towards the center. So it would be going down Adams Street eventually as much as we can do per year, and eventually get to West Mill, and then connect that whole area down there through Adams Street, not Harding Street at this point. So,
We probably wouldn't do most of that sidewalk stuff until we put in that 4-lane connector between West Mill and Hospital Road, right up Ice House on through.
Really?
Mr. Massaro.
I've said this before, as long as you're talking about Harding Street and everything else. The problem with Harding Street gets significantly worse when the schools get out, Dover Sherburne High gets out. Those kids come down there 45, 50 miles an hour. I pull out at the end of Long Meadow or whatever, there's no car in sight, and before I can get onto Harding Street, there's somebody right on my tail, almost every time, so. I just thought I'd mention that.
And then they throw all their little cheap wine bottles right in front of our house.
Well, see, I don't front.
Really bad
on-
wine,
I
too.
don't
It's
front
not
on
like
Harding
there's
Street.
no
That's
taste,
one of your
no
complaints,
class.
probably.
Well, in honor of our retired town administrator, we got in a dig at Dover at 7:45 PM. That's tonight's meeting, so
Duly noted in the minutes.
gone but not forgotten. All right.
Are we keeping separate scores for each of the selectmen? I just,
Anything else? So my only question about this Mo, and I've raised this before, and it is just, it seems to me with respect to new sidewalks of any significance, that it's really a capital budget item. It should not be an operating budget item. And so kind of as part of our capital planning process, I think we have to have sidewalks included within that. And that's how it ought to be planned out. I mean, I understand that this has been kind of a project that's been out there for a while. I have no objection to doing it. I mean, it seems like it's a relatively short dollars to get a sidewalk in a pretty well-traveled area that would connect pretty busy areas of town. But I think as we look at this budget and look at it being used for new sidewalks, that just strikes me this should be a capital budget item, something that we can consider along with other capital priorities and weigh against other proposals, and not sort of stuck in as an operating budget. I don't object in the future to having an operating budget for sidewalk maintenance for the kind of things that you'll do routinely and all that stuff, but I think new sidewalks, I think those are capital items. They ought to go through the capital budgeting process, because we have to also weigh, when you're adding sidewalks, you're also adding the cost of maintaining them. It's not a high number, but again, that just strikes me as a capital item and not an operating item. And so, again, we're still getting used to our new capital policy that we've adopted and our new approach to this, but I think looking forward to next year's budget cycle, that this is something that for planning new sidewalks should be part of the capital project, and it's really something that could also be incorporated into the townwide master planning process. I think in terms of getting the list of priorities of sidewalks, that seems to me to be a townwide master planning issue, to identify, here's where we think we need sidewalks in the future, and then we can get some cost estimates for that and think about how we're gonna go about doing it.
I think that's in the charter, too.
I believe it is. Okay, next.
That should do it for any additions that I've put into the budget.
Christine, any questions, thoughts?
I
That's
had
after
one,
Mo's presentation at the warrant committee, so.
I had one minor administrative reaction when I looked through all the budgets, and I don't care one way or the other. The snow and ice budget is $293,432, which makes it sound like it's a number that we got to from something, which we didn't. It's just the number we always keep, and it's been there for years, and it hasn't changed. And I just looked at it and said, why don't we just make the snow and ice budget a $300,000 budget, and be, it's more logical to me. That's just the way I reacted to it when I saw it. I was like,
It's just how it all adds up.
yeah, I know. I'm also somebody who always rounds off the gas at the pump to the nearest 5 or 10
Even if it comes
cents.
out the
It's
tank?
just easier to do the addition. It's easier to do the addition, but anyway, it's a random thought as I'm reading. It's like, why do we have this complex number instead of just call it 300K and leaving it go with that? But,
I think we should keep it there just to keep you on your toes.
okay.
Any other questions for Mo?
I had one more question, and that, Mo, has to do with the overtime.
Yes.
Since you've been here,
Yes.
what has happened to overtime? Is it the same, or has it gone up or down?
We've cut overtime down. I believe we cut it down fairly good since I've been here. There's a lot of less overtime. We do try to do what we can. I know with the schools, they've asked for different things that we can't do when school's there, so that those get done on overtime. But we're still working on that. But I also don't want to take away any work that should be done just because we're trying to knock overtime down. We still want it. We have a lot of community interest in different things that we work on overtime. There's the holiday stroll, the garden club needs things, the Angel Run, the Medfield Day, Medfield Green. It's just a lot of different things that we do try to do with the community, and a lot of things that are on the weekends too. So it's difficult to control, but we are doing a much better job now of controlling that, and there's not a lot of waste going on with overtime. But we are trying to catch up on projects. We are trying to you know, take care of storm damage. We are trying to do a lot of different things that just can't happen a lot of times during the course of the day.
In your head, do you have a magnitude of the overtime? Is it half of what it was before you came? Or?
I don't think it's half. I would say it's probably at least a third less or more.
Okay.
But I don't believe it's half yet.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
I'll make a point about overtime based on discussions that we've had, I think back when the warrant committee. Overtime in this town is not automatically bad if overtime allows us to get a job done without having to staff up. So if we could cut overtime to zero and then need more people to get some work done, then all of a sudden we not only have the salary for those people, but we have all the benefits. And I know in the past, there's been a deliberate, not necessarily just in the highway department, but there's been at least thoughtful consideration to doing things in a way that doesn't require us to hire a lot more people if we have people who are flexible enough and we can manage it through overtime. So
I do admit we have a very talented staff in our DPW. They can do a lot of different things, and a lot of times we take on some projects that you know, some other towns wouldn't take on, and it does require overtime at times. And I give my guys a lot of credit for being able to do these things. So.
all right. Overtime isn't automatically bad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Roberta, would you like to go next?
Sure.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is this different than what we already have?
I
brochure.
think the
It's the newsletter.
the budget sheet is, just the summary is different.
Okay.
Okay. So working with Bob Sliney, who's my warrant representative, we looked at the Council on Aging budget that I put together, and originally, the budget summary that you have noted a 7% increase. But after talking with him, we realized that the $9,500 that was appropriated in October 2018 was really part of my fiscal 19 budget. So that makes my total fiscal year 19 budget $246,378. My fiscal year 20 budget, I am asking for $253,535, which is only a 2.9% increase. And that, so that 2.9% increase, if you look at it that way, really it's just going to maintain our current services to the seniors in the community, and will include the 2 Saturday staff for 7 hours each Saturday for both of them. So in my operations, the building operations is pretty much the same. That's $55,060. So that's my budget. Questions?
Are the Saturday staff different staff than your regular
Yes.
weekday
Yep.
staff?
Yep, I hired them at the beginning of the grant last March 3rd,
Just for,
just for Saturdays.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So they have other jobs then, probably?
Yep, one is a licensed social worker, and she works at the Foxborough Council on Aging. And the other one, Elaine, she's a Medfield resident, and she's been doing, working with seniors for a long time privately as a private companion, and has a good understanding of, you know, aging needs.
Oh, good. Sounds
Yeah.
like you got good
Yeah,
staff
two
then.
two
Great.
good staff, yep. And I have a great volunteer, Sylvia Brady. She comes in every Saturday and she works the reception desk. So it's a great team. And so the next page on that packet I gave you, it shows you the growth. I might as well just.
Just one question.
Oh, yes, sir.
Gus, do you have any questions before? All right. My only question is, it does look like in the original sheet we got, you had identified 121 people
Yes.
who came
but
on
that was-
Saturdays, and now you've got 182
Yes, so we've had an increase.
in the last couple of weeks.
Yep. Well, that was in early December that I put that together, because Town Hall needed it by December 12th. So it was earlier than that, yeah.
Pre-holiday parties.
I guess, right?
What's that?
Pre-holiday parties.
Maybe. So the next is the next page is just a graph of our growth and just a little bit. In 2006, when we were at the FAF Center entirely, we started with the My Senior Center software, and we had 260 active participants back then in 2006. And we have grown considerably, and I printed this off the other day. So we now have 1,043 active participants at the center in 2018. It's just progressively gone up, and you can see that by the chart. The next page is just the statistics on the age ranges of folks that come into the center, and it shows the 1,043. Our largest group is ages over 85 at 24.2% of our population is over 85. And we had a big jump in our 55 to 59. We're up to 1.9% of 20 people, which is really great. We were at 10 for the longest time. The next page is our average daily participation. I highlighted Saturdays because we're at an average daily Saturday count of 53. But if you look at our other days, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, we're well over 100 people coming into the building. So that was my goal right along, is to hit 100. So the next page is just our kind of our general categories of events, which shows that we've put in over 62,000 hours of activities and programs for the community over the year. And
Robert, is this tracking the staff's hours, or is this the?
No, this is
This is
participation.
activity, this is participation?
Yep, all participation.
How do you collect, they don't fill out a time sheet or something like
No,
that?
no, sir. If you came in, I
just-
could have you sign up for your scan card. And
Okay.
when you
Oh, okay.
come
I see
in,
how
you
you do it.
could
Okay.
scan the computer and utilize our software.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Wondered
It's-
how, That's a lot of categories here, I just.
Yes, well, I'm going to try to streamline those because, so I can get better. And I did streamline them for the Saturday program. I put one category, which is reducing social isolation, and you can see that the unduplicated count of participation on Saturdays is 179. And so that program is actually doing quite well.
So Roberta, on that prior page, that 62,000 number, that's picked up from your software that people signed into
Correct.
those
Yep.
62,000 hours?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
So
the
there's
way-
probably more than that, because not everybody signs in.
Not everybody signs in. And I actually, there was Emmett from the EOEA sent around a questionnaire and asking the centers, does everyone scan in, and what percentage do you think? And it was between 5 and 10% that all of us felt that people come in and just don't sign in, so we really don't capture quite a few. We try, but then you feel like you're just kind of yelling at them, sign in.
So if I look at the unduplicated and duplicated, when I see, the unduplicated is how many unique individuals participate in that. The duplicated is how many times do individuals in general do that. So you can almost take a look at the ratio to see
Yep.
how engaged people are in particular activities. And if I
Yep.
go to the bottom and I see 915 unduplicated and 25,000 duplicate, I'm using real crude numbers here,
Sure.
but I'm saying, so basically, people at the very least come in at least twice a month, just to,
Oh, we-
1,000 doing
Sure.
25,000, that's more than twice a month that
Sure.
those people are
And-
coming in.
Right,
on
and we
average.
have people come in every day.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes they'll come in the morning and then they come
Yep.
back in the afternoon, but that doesn't count,
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the people who come in, like, it's tax season, so we'll have the people coming in just for their taxes. Or the people who come in, we don't capture all the people who come in for medical equipment,
Mm-hmm.
because they're usually younger people, and they don't really want to stop, and, it's the adult children of moms and dads who need a walker or bath chair or something like that. So we can't capture those, but we can capture, we have them sign out the equipment, so we can capture how much equipment we give out, which is always about 230 plus pieces a year.
So Roberta, for what I've noticed when I'm there once a month with my selectmen hours,
Yep.
and I'll be there on Friday, I guess,
Yep.
this week, is that there's a group of maybe a dozen people that are there that overlap with me for an hour that I'm sure haven't signed in at all for anything.
Could be, but, they might be. Fridays,
They're not going to Tai Chi, they're not going to.
no, they just come in and
Come
we
in and they're
have,
having coffee, they're reading the paper, they're
Correct.
picking up the bread or whatever.
but we have a category for a center visit, so we can capture
Oh,
the
they
people.
sign in as they come in the door?
Yes,
Okay, all right,
correct.
gotcha.
Yep. Anything else?
Anything else?
No? Oh, wow, that was just.
Anything else? Well, I see you put your capital budget plan
Oh,
on
my
here as
capital
well.
budget plan, yes. And actually,
We had this conversation last night.
yes, we did. And I have been in contact, so I tried to do that state, the state site. Well, I'm sorry, I cannot navigate that, so I couldn't get any pricing on vehicles. So I did contact Turtle Top Vans, and I spoke with Bob Flynn, and he is going to put together some prices, but he thought the 14-passenger bus that we have now, the Ford E350, would probably be around $70,000. So I wanted to get but on the state, it probably is going to be less, but I just can't get into that site.
We can pull that information for you.
Okay, thank you.
Can you just give the selectmen an update on your senior tax work-off program?
Oh, sure. So this year, we had to have a lottery because we had over 65 applications. And so we do have 65. We had 65. We have a few people that have dropped off. So the folks on the wait list have come up. We have them placed all throughout town departments. We have folks here at Town Hall, we have folks at the library, we have folks at the schools, we have folks at the swap when it opens up. People love to work at the swap. The animal shelter, and we have, I think we might have some, well, we had DPW last year, we had someone helping DPW. I may or may not. Susan Bernstein, my volunteer coordinator, since they're volunteers, she really runs that program, so I let her do that. But it's a very successful program, and we knew that we were going to have a lot of applications because, of course, the taxes were going up with that, and so we did see that.
We had 65 applications.
We got more than 65, so we had to
You
do
had
a lottery.
65 slots.
Yes.
How many people applied, roughly?
Oh, I think it was like, I don't know, maybe 79.
Okay,
I-
so
I'm
we're-
making that up. I don't
okay.
really know.
So we're
again.
close to the number of people that were interested, but not.
Yep,
okay.
yes, but last year, we didn't have to have a lottery. We just, and I don't even think we had 65 applications. This year, we knew we were going to get more, and we did.
So the reason I'm curious is that, we've gotten casual notes and various things over the years from people that are saying, gee, I think what you need to do is just not charge seniors as much on taxes, and we can't do that.
Well,
But-
there's a bill that, at the State House, that they're, and I have the article at my desk, and I can't tell you who the folks are that are sponsoring the bill, but to freeze taxes for seniors at a particular point. And I can get that information to you if you're interested.
I've heard the rumors of that. I'll be curious to see how that works. But
Yeah,
my
well,
only point
but-
was, there's very little we can do, at least right now, about this,
So-
other than if you have seniors who are interested in
right.
tax work-off.
The other thing, though, we can go up to, we did go up to 1,000, but you can go up to $1,500 for, assistance for seniors. That's part of the
If we gotta
tax
put
work.
more money in it, and if the interest is there, I would think we'd want to
But
let
that
more
would-
seniors take advantage of what we can let them take advantage of, rather than necessarily, like, I don't mind helping seniors out more, but given either help fewer seniors out more or more seniors out less, I'd probably go in the direction of more seniors out less, if the interest is there.
More seniors give less.
Yeah.
Right, well, I always wanted to, when it was 500, we had 65. I'd rather give more to the masses to help people than,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
I think it behooves the town financially to support the seniors, to keep them here, because when they move out, it's very likely that we're gonna get someone living in their house that has, it's gonna cost the town more. And so that I think that it makes sense for we as a town government to invest in the seniors. Sudbury's doing that through a program where they actually reduce the taxes for the seniors. They got special legislation. There's also a deferral of taxes available for seniors.
yeah, but for the deferral, there are some financial criteria for that, like assets can't be so much, and income So it's not like just a deferral for everyone, at least through the
Hardship
assessor's
situation.
office. Yeah.
It's a what?
Hardship. Have to prove, show hardship.
Right, right. Right. Two other things. So we, between the Council on Aging and the Friends Group, we want to build a garage for our vehicles. Bill the other day spent an hour and a half chipping away at one bus to get it running, to get people to the center, and he had a couple of PT appointments he had to get people to. We did get a estimate from a modular garage company, and it was $125,000, and it included basically everything except for some groundwork. But Bill had a conversation with Maurice at the Christmas party, and Maurice said that he'd be happy to help us with the groundwork. But my problem is I can't seem to get on the agenda of the Permanent Building Planning Committee. I've been.
They haven't had a meeting since you requested it in December. They haven't
had
met.
one?
No. No.
So when are they going to have a meeting? Because we want to like kind of get this moving, because you know, it's those three vehicles are out there. It's like $150,000 or more of town assets that are sitting out there, and if they're frozen shut, I don't, you know.
Is there no room in the DPW garage for them?
Don't get.
Was the answer no? I mean, there's as I recall, there's some extra
So
room
I
in the
asked-
DPW garage. It's a
Yeah,
fairly
right.
large building.
I asked Mr. Feeney when he was here, and it was an absolutely no. And I asked Mr. Goulet here, who's just here, no. And then I tried going over to the public safety building. All we want is, well, all we wanted, now we want our own garage. All we wanted is when there was a snowstorm or an ice storm, we could put one bus in the bays so that we could go pick it up, drive to the center, and be good to go. But both big buildings said no. And one of my seniors did a snoop job and went by the DPW last year during a snowstorm, and all the employees' cars were in the bays. So, we want our own garage.
Could use their garages at home.
We want our own garage, and we have the money to do it.
Christine, can you talk to Mo and figure this out? Because I get you want your own garage. Everybody wants their own thing. Everybody wants their own building. Everyone wants their own stuff. But if there's room in a taxpayer-supported building and it's a matter of sorting this out, I think we should sort that out before we build another garage.
Well, I disagree with you, because we also have no storage in that building. When it was built, there's no storage, and we need more storage.
Well, it's a 10-year-old building.
Huh?
It's a 10-year-old building. So, I mean, if it was inadequate 10 years ago, then we made a mistake when we designed it 10 years ago.
Well, we
But
already decided that at the
right, well,
town
it's
meeting last
well,
year.
right.
We have some buildings just right over the hill that we could probably use for.
Yeah, that's true.
storage if we needed to.
Do you want like 15 buildings worth of storage that you can use anytime soon?
No, but we do store the boat.
Yeah, we have-
store the
we have a lot of-
boat
we have a-
Shed.
Right. We have a lot of storage space.
We
so
could probably even
not
use
far
some
from you.
commercial space that's tagged for there.
All right, and so the next.
Well, on the garage thing, let's see what we can figure out. If there's a substantive reason why these can't be parked in one of the other very large, very new garages that we have. Okay, and then we'll figure it out.
And the next thing is, when I had given Evelyn a letter for our February supper club, I did not have a date, and so I want to ask for permission for a wine and beer permit for Wednesday, February 20th, because we are doing a dance and dine with Frankie evening.
Okay, can we put that on the consent agenda for next Tuesday?
Put it on.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
is that it?
Anything else?
So the capital budget request I have for this year, and I mentioned it to the warrant committee last night. The two side doors have about a 1.5 to 2 inch lip, and it's they're non-ADA compliant. So I'd like to get those reconfigured so that people with walkers and wheelchairs can just go right out those side doors, especially in case of an emergency. And the front and rear patio areas, they have if you remember, there's round bricks on both front and rear doors. So the bricks have been sinking, and there's a lip also out there. It's a big trip hazard. And before Jerry left, we had been talking about taking all those bricks out and cementing it over so it was nice and flush and there'd be no real trip hazard. So that's what I'd like to see done, if I can get that capital budget request.
So was that in the facilities budget?
Those two things are in the facility.
They're in the
budget.
facilities budget.
Vehicles are not in the capital budget.
Right.
I just got them last night, so we'll.
Is that an expensive project, or is that, doesn't sound like it would be? But-
Well, I can't answer that because I tried to get a name of some contractors from Michael Quinlan just to get someone out to look at it, but he referred me to Amy, which is fine, so I'll be setting up a.
So we don't have a cost estimate in the capital budget?
I think
for
there's a
it?
cost estimate in the capital budget. Off the top of my head, I just don't
Okay,
remember what
okay,
it is.
okay.
It was
That's
less than
fine.
$10,000.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's, yeah, that makes sense, okay.
Okay.
And this also says increasing lighting in the parking lot?
Oh, my goodness. The lighting is horrible. If it's a dark night, and if you go down Ice House Road, you'll see the difference between Kingsbury Club parking lot lights and our lights. If it's a dark night, people can't find their cars. It's horrible.
I was at the high school parking, I don't know whether I've just been oblivious to it until last night, but going to the public hearing last night, the high school parking lot, I went in through
Very
the middle
bright.
school. Those lights are pretty nice.
Yeah, very
Those things
bright.
are really bright.
Even
Those are
Dale's,
the LED lights.
They're the LED lights, yeah, they're really nice. Yeah, you know, for an area that you want to really bathe in a lot of light, those were, I was
yeah, and
impressed.
I think the people who vote there should have probably more light, especially at night, too. Thank you. Very dark, thank you.
Is that included as well in the capital, the facilities
No,
budget?
I just got that last evening.
Okay.
Before you go, can I just share a couple things with you that I went to a couple programs at the MMA's annual meeting a couple weeks
Oh,
ago
yeah, mhm.
with you in mind. One of them was, one of them was on starter homes, and I just mentioned that there's a new category of under 40R starter homes that apparently has replaced something else that never took off. But it's under 1850 square feet, heated area, has to be 4 units to an acre, 3-acre sites. Then I went to a program on healthy aging, and a lot of that seemed to be about adding accessory dwelling units. Newbury has a zoning bylaw that they pointed us to for ADUs, they call them, accessory dwelling units. Boston recommended that as one of their 4 things that they were doing for healthy aging. Backyard units, basement units, they said in Boston. Intergenerational home shares in Boston. MIT and somebody else, or in Northeastern, I guess, created pairs for students and seniors. Compact living, houses with public assets. They were suggesting low-interest municipal loans to cover the cost of doing ADUs. Everybody's talking about these accessory dwelling units.
I believe we have that already as
Isn't
We have
that like an
family
in-law
units.
apartment?
a, right.
Yeah,
Family apartments.
yeah.
Uh,
And those are happening in Medfield, too. We have a lot of seniors.
I mean, I don't think what they're talking about, I don't think have to be family units. They can just be anything. And then I went to a program on age-friendly communities, which didn't turn out to be too interesting, but they said that there's some sort of new community compact, that thing that the Baker administration has pushed out, and it's on age-friendly communities. I didn't understand too much more about that. They pointed us to, there was somebody there from the Berkshire County Action Plan with respect to age-friendly communities. I looked at their website. It didn't seem too exciting to me, but, I mean, a lot of what I seem to be hearing is that it's really helpful to get people services. It's not so much the housing, it's the services. So,
I think it's a combination of both, though.
yeah,
Yeah.
we need
Yeah.
some housing options for older people in Medfield.
Sure.
So that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
That's anything else? Nope. Christine?
Nope.
Anything else? Chief?
Good evening again. Any particular place you'd like to start, or any particular budget?
Well, let me find yours. I know I have a sticky on it.
extra copies if you don't know.
There we go. Want to start with police operations?
Sure.
Is that okay, Gus and Pete?
So there are a few increases I'm asking for in this. There is actually one decrease. The first one is 73,000, but that's salary increases. The salary increases are for step increases in longevity, so that's contractual. The police contract actually, just to give you a heads up, actually expires June of this year. So, radio maintenance, requesting a $1,000 decrease. And the reason I'm requesting that is I went to the capital budget and we're going to need new repeaters, and it was suggested that I look for a reserve fund transfer. So I think if we decrease, if successful, we should be able to decrease this line item by $1,000.
You'll pay for it out of FY19 funds from reserve fund, so you don't get no on it?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, it's a fairly critical
Yeah, no, I
issue.
just wanted to understand
Yeah.
what that meant.
Right, I actually met with Jack Wolf today on that, so, and I'm gonna meet with the warrant committee next Monday. The equipment maintenance increase, that's a pretty big increase, and I can explain that further. That's $12,015. What we did, when we moved into the public safety building, we capitalized a lot of those items, so we new equipment and stuff, we put them out like 2 or 3 year maintenance contracts and paid for them and capitalized them, so now they're all coming due. And I can get down each one if you want. You do have it in an attached sheet. Our CAD system, that's a straight increase of $920. That's our entire computer records dispatch. There's a $920 increase in that. It's probably, I think it's like 3 pages after the first page. It says maintenance contracts FY20 budget. It's just a single sheet of paper with like 6 lines on it. It's a typed up sheet.
I don't think I have that.
Okay, well, I can get down them if you'd like. Get down each one. So another one is Cybercom. Cybercom does our radio communications. That was a capitalized item, so that maintenance is coming due.
When you say it was capitalized in the maintenance,
So
that
it was
says we capitalized it for 3 years.
2 or 3 years, what we could get when we did the public safety building, we did out a maintenance contract for 2 or 3 years.
Oh, you capitalized the maintenance contract.
Maintenance contract.
Okay, that's,
Yeah.
I got it.
So now they're coming due.
Okay,
Now they've expired and they're coming due.
okay.
Tasers, the breathalyzer. The thing with the breathalyzer, the state was covering all the cost, and I don't know if they're just so old now. Now they've put the cost onto the towns to buy a maintenance contract. So that's $1,676. And then the 2 fingerprint machines we have, the automated fingerprint machines that we have in the building. It's the same thing. We capitalized them for a couple of years. Now they're coming due. And the last thing was the addition wraparound service, and I had to ask Owen what that was. That is, I was told that is the Wi-Fi for the entire public safety building, the maintenance contract. Seems a little high, but nevertheless, that's what it is. So that's the equipment maintenance increase, the training and education increase.
Can I stop you there, Chief?
Yep,
Just one
absolutely.
second. This is a question for Christine as well, because there's also money in the facilities budget for contracts for the public safety building. And so,
Cleaning contracts and
those are just
trash.
cleaning contracts.
Cleaning and trash.
All right. All right.
Yeah, a lot of those were moved out
Mm-hmm.
a few years back, but these were still kept with the public safety building.
Okay. It seems like Wi-Fi is something that would either be in the facilities budget or the,
That's what
Or the
Chief
IT
Wilhelmy
budget.
and I talked about that today. When they built the building, they created this budget, and we're using some of the funds to maintain that. But we talked today about how this needs to be separated.
okay.
The next one is training education increase. Training and education goes up every year. The cost for us to send our officers over to in-service, the actual tuition they charge us, was $1,500 just for the entire department. They've doubled it. It's $3,000 now, so that's gone up. We've had, excuse me one second, let me just grab this. And also, it costs $3,000 tuition to send an officer to the recruit academy. I anticipate that we're going to have one, possibly two this year, not in addition, just replacements. We have an officer that mandatory retirement this coming May, so that goes into that item as well.
So I have a question on that, and
Yep.
but we can get through it, and then I'll turn back to it. But go ahead.
Okay. And then I believe the last one. I think that was it. That was the last one, the increase for operations, training, and education. So we have one decrease and 3 increases. Overall, it's a 3.47% increase on that operations.
Pete, questions?
I guess the first question that I had was about, in general, the utility costs for this building versus the prior building. Are we paying a lot more for utilities now because we have such a much bigger building?
So are we in the public safety building?
Yep.
Are we still doing operations?
Well, I just had
Sure.
that question under police in general.
So your question again on the
Just
specific?
the magnitude change in the utilities for the new building versus the
Well,
old
obviously,
building.
yeah. I mean, it's much bigger. Electricity seems to be a problem for us. We also have the solar panels. I know the town accountant is preparing a report on that. I don't have that information in front of me. We are having a savings on that. But every year, that's a fight to try to get the necessary money we need for electricity to cover the police and fire. Telephones, seems like, you know, the cost is very expensive. Water and sewer is not bad, and natural gas we actually do very well on. I don't know if that answers your specific questions. I mean,
I
it's
just wondered
definitely.
if you had some sort of idea of the magnitude increase over the old building.
Well, I mean, the size alone, it would be, I would have to go
Okay,
back and look
all
through
right,
those
that's
budgets,
okay.
but I would imagine that it's quite a bit of an increase.
So my second question had to do with there was a vacation line item of $142,000. I guess I was just wondering why that was a separate line item and why that's not
Okay,
sort of
that's
factored into
operations.
people's, I don't remember where I saw that.
Yeah, that would be under operations.
And I guess my question is, why isn't that just something that's factored into somebody's salary? Is that to pay the overtime for when they're gone or something, or?
That's to cover the overtime to cover the vacation day. Just trying to see where you saw it. I know it's in here, just,
It's on the second page of Joy's sheet.
okay.
So that's basically an overtime figure then.
Yeah, that covers vacations for shifts that have to be filled.
All right. And then I guess my next question was about overtime, because I know at one point we were paying a lot in overtime because we didn't have a full complement of officers.
So right now, with the exception of the 2 that I have in the recruit academy, they actually graduate at the end of February. That should help. They do go through an 8-week field training program, so they're going to be with somebody. They're not going to actually assume their own shift. But once they're through that, we'll be back up to full staffing, and then we're going to lose somebody in May. So then I'm going to be back down 1. We did have 2 openings in the dispatch. I filled those right away. One of the folks retired. The other actually became a police officer, and he's in the academy. And we filled those pretty quick, so cut down on the overtime. I think the overtime is, I think it's under control. It's still there. It's a necessary evil. It's just one of those things. But I think we're doing pretty good in it. We're doing pretty good in that budget.
Well, once you get fully staffed up, then you can operate with less overtime, I would think.
Sure. I mean, people still take time off. People still are out sick. You never know when somebody gets injured. But yeah, it certainly helps. It certainly helps to have a full staff.
And then my last question was $2,700. It's a small amount, but it was to purchase a light at South and Pound, and I just was,
So,
is that to purchase a street light, or what is it?
no, so what, Chief Meany had purchased you probably noticed the lights at South and Pound, they're automatic crosswalk lights. They flash, they're automatic.
Okay.
They actually cost more than that. And what happened, they were on a 30-day trial to see if it was something that we liked. And I called the company and told them, because of things that I had to take out of my budget, the traffic lights, that I couldn't afford it. They said, if you'd like, keep it for the year. If you don't like it, we'll still take it out. If you like it, you can pay for it next July.
Oh.
So I said, so I have a lot of people that like it.
Yeah.
I hate to take it out of there,
Make that
especially
call
with
again
new
next-
housing going in, senior housing going in down there.
Yep.
And the school, and it's, I've had a lot of good compliments about it, so it's kind of hard to take it out now. So I will have to pay that.
Well, make the call next July and say, gee, I'm thinking about taking it out again, see what they say to you.
Yeah, they're a
Thank you,
local
Chief.
company. They're actually in Walpole. They're very good to deal with, so they've been good. It was something Chief Meany thought was a need, and I agree with him.
Thank you.
Gus?
I'll make a general comment, but it's not actually against your budget. And this will probably follow in the discussion we have a little farther down on overall budgets. But I'm looking at the total percentage increase in the budget, and most of it's driven off of salaries, and recognizing that we actually have that same kind of pressure with the schools, and in thinking about where the town goes, this has got nothing to do with contracted negotiations. It's just that we are on a path from a labor standpoint that basically is saying we're throwing in the towel on Prop 2.5 because there's these labor drivers, and I'm not sure what to do about it, but I'm paying a lot more attention to it now, because either we're serious about the fiscal discipline, or we're not, and we're gonna have to find some effective ways to address that in the long run. So I looked, when I first looked at it, but the largest amount of the increase is really the labor, and it's kind of locked in, so. The only other thing that caught, and if you already mentioned this, I just wasn't there, it seemed like there was a jump in uniforms. I wasn't sure why that thing, I'm at that detailed sheet, it's like a $10,000, it was 34, if I'm reading it right, this is hard.
It was 34 in fiscal 2018.
Okay, and then it went up 10,000?
And then in 2019, my current was, we're gonna level fund it up, we're requesting level funded for next year. I think that's probably an increase in personnel once we get up to
Okay,
full
so
staff.
that's okay, okay,
And then the initial outlay for the 2 officers going to the academy is
okay.
pretty expensive. You put the word in police, put the word fire in front of it, the price of everything goes up. Pair of pants, shirts, so it's,
Okay. Okay, thanks.
okay.
So to Gus's point, because I had the same, and again, this is not a criticism of your budget at all, but I had the same reaction to the increases. We have another contract coming up shortly that we'll be negotiating. And so I think as we go into the next season with 1 or 2 retirements next year, I think I'm going to want to see an analysis and a rationale for the current size of the force that we have. I mean, because that's really the only thing you can do apart from, you know, given the way these contract negotiations go and the influence in the state legislature that public employee unions have, and no disrespect at all, they're entitled to it. I'm going to want to see more of an analysis of that, and comparing the overtime costs and the justification of that relative to the size of the town. I know that's been, the 19 has sort of been our size for a while, and it may well be that's the bare minimum we need, but I think given this pressure, given where things are going to be going in the future, I think in the next round of it and before we fill those positions, I don't have an issue with it from a budget standpoint because we don't have that analysis, but I am going to want to think about and talk about that issue. And it may well be that that's correct, and obviously we had a very substantial increase in the size of the fire department year over year to add the ALS service, and so we can't, I think, automatically assume that our current staffing levels in any department are appropriate to what we want to pay, or at least recognize the cost of having a department of that size. I suspect that the size is correct, and that maybe it's too small, and you can do it that way. But again, I think at least if we're going to have some fiscal discipline on this point, we need to make sure as we move forward with our budgeting process that we are looking at it each time. And I think I certainly be looking for departments when they come in not only to justify the increases, but to justify the baseline as well. Because if all if you're assuming that you're at the baseline and it's just going to stay that way, then Gus is correct. It's going to grow past the natural ability of our town's tax base to support it.
Absolutely.
Right, and it's not a force of gravity or nature. It's a public choice that we
I mean,
make, and
it's
so
understandable.
yeah.
Which one would you like to do next?
Well, I'm going to flip through and see which one I come to first in the abstract organization of this binder. You want to do the building?
Public safety building?
Public safety building. Yeah, I found that one, so let's do that one.
Yeah, I really didn't have a chance to discuss this with the fire chief, but just very briefly, we are looking for increases. Like I had mentioned a little earlier, the electricity is something that we fight every year. I think that the first year we moved into the building, the engineers and whatever study they do, they gave us an estimate, and we were cut right off the bat, right at the beginning of the, and we've been fighting it ever since, trying to be responsible about it, but just trying to pay the bill. So we're looking for a $5,500 increase in that, just to come in more in line with what we actually use. And again, there is a savings there. I'm not sure what it is. I know Joy is putting something together to, because that comes back directly here. So I have those numbers. I don't have them tonight. Telephones, again, same thing, just trying to get more in line with what we actually use, so we're not coming back to you folks. Water and sewer, and that's something, I talked to Jack today about it. We might be able to, we're looking for a $550 increase, and it's actually just an estimate. There is more personnel in the building now, so it's just strictly an estimate. That might be something we might be able to live without, and maybe just see how the year goes. But that's an estimate on our part.
We could get them to start using the bathroom in the historical commissions, because
Natural gas, we're actually looking for $1,000, a decrease,
Hey.
because that's more in line with what we were actually using.
All right. And do you have one more budget?
Yes, one or two. No, well, I actually have two more budgets. I have traffic markings and signs, if you want to do that next. And then I have animal
under
control.
highway. At least if that's where it started off in my book.
Okay. Nope. All right, go ahead, and I'll.
So traffic markings and signs, again, we're looking to what we actually use. We're actually, in the traffic markings, we're actually looking for a $6,000. We're recommending a decrease. Based on what we used last year, we were able to finally get the whole town lined and painted. It was like a 4-month project, but we finally got it done, and it came in actually lower than what we anticipated, so we think we can do without $6,000 in that line item.
Yeah, I'm not tracking you there. I've got this as not that it's a big deal, it's a $3,000 or $2,700 increase. 71,024?
That's street signs. $2,700?
No. Traffic markings and the budget sheet we have shows 2019 traffic markings and signs, 68,324. 2020 request, 71,024. I don't have a problem with the increase, it's just say it wasn't a $6,000 decrease.
Let me do this.
It said line item increase 2,700 for purchase of light at South and Pound Streets, increase of 3%.
If I may.
Sure.
I just want to make sure you have the most updated sheets, obviously. These were last updated yesterday morning. So.
I don't have
perhaps
those.
they didn't get there.
Okay.
I don't think Joy has not sent them out yet.
Okay, let me get.
So we've been asking questions with the wrong information.
So we got to start again at the beginning,
Start
Chief.
again.
Yeah.
We might have new
Whatever
questions.
you'd like to do. I'm on overtime.
Then we're all done here. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, it did go down. Okay, good. That works.
Okay, so my apologies for.
No, we like this much better.
Yeah, so overall, it's a $3,300 decrease in that budget. That's a pretty simple budget. It's and again, the $2,700 in that street sign, that's just to help pay for that South and Pound light, so I can pay those folks.
Great.
And the animal control budget is actually level funded. I just want to say they do a great job too. We have Jenny and her 2 assistants, and it's the best bang for the buck that the town has. It really is.
We should institute a fee for any calls requiring them to take a dead squirrel off sidewalks or chase a bird out of somebody's garage. That should like
Okay.
be a
In full
$5 or $10 or
disclosure-
$20 house
They
call.
do a lot of things that other town animal control offices will not do. They do a great
All
job.
the other stuff's great, but we should have a $10 fee for those two.
Tell Jenny she can make that out to the selectmen, that invoice, because in December she took a bird out of my office.
Offices are okay. I'm talking about garages where you just leave the door open and the bird flies out. That's the one that, or the dead squirrel on the sidewalk. It's like, we need a town shovel that people can come pick up.
They can borrow the shovel, yeah.
She did a great job removing the bird from my office.
They do a
We've got
great
some
job.
great video.
Is it a hawk or just a sparrow?
There's a little bird.
Just
Yeah,
It
I-
seemed really big when
Yeah,
it
she
first
has
flew in.
pictures.
Like giant. Condor
She
even.
has pictures of it. I'm sorry, it was kind of funny. It really is.
It was very funny, I know. She's got a lot of pictures
You
of me.
you don't put this stuff in the patch, right? This is all just,
Is he right?
I mean, in the Medfield Press, sorry. Same question for you, sorry. I meant the Medfield. Oh, great.
Anything else?
I don't have anything else. If you folks do.
Pete, anything
I'm
further?
happy to-
I'm all set, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, and we're supposed to have Amy Collar in here with the facilities budget, but
We're gonna move that to
postponed
next Tuesday.
Next week, yeah. All right. So, I mean, from a process standpoint, I was hoping we'd be able to vote some sort of preliminary approval or blessing or non-objection or what have you, just to give the warrant committee, I mean, they already have these things submitted to them, and obviously we haven't had a chance to do a full scrub of these budgets. You know, that would be my preference, and we'll get this when we get to the goals next year, that we can do this kind of on a more accelerated basis in the future, so that we're in a position to do that for the warrant committee and send that to them. But thoughts on, from Pete and Gus, on what we should talk about and what we need to talk about tonight with respect to the overall budget picture, recognizing that we haven't spoken to every department head, and at least as to the facilities budget, Amy wants to come in. Gus, thoughts? I mean, Pete, starting with Pete, thoughts? Pete?
I'm sorry, in terms of,
What we ought to discuss on the overall budget picture, whether we want to take some kind of a vote with respect to the budgets as submitted. I mean, I don't know that I even have all of the most up-to-date budgets as submitted, so I don't know what use it would be to take a vote on it. I mean, I think it's,
I mean, I guess I don't have a problem with the budgets that I've seen come across that we've discussed here tonight, although, are the other ones that we've seen.
yeah, I mean, I did not have a reaction to anything that I wanted to make a change imminently. Or, so from that standpoint, I think, I mean, I'm okay with them as a preliminary budget, subject to further discussions and analysis. I mean, going forward, I think I'd rather have more time with them in advance than we have. But Gus, thoughts on this?
A couple things, and I have more paper for you as well.
Excellent.
As I was thinking about what we were doing here tonight, recognizing the warrant committee digs in and goes through the details of budget. So the issue around reasonableness of specific expenses, I guess I look to the warrant committee to uncover any of those kinds of details. And, you know, if there's like common sense or challenges around that. But I looked at this for us as being maybe a broader a broader question around thinking about what the town can and can't afford. Recognizing the trajectory that we're on or have been on for a while, realizing that there's good arguments for, we don't get any completely superfluous budget requests, but at the end of the day, in my head, I've been saying, so if all these good budget requests come in and we just kind of always acquiesce, then we're basically saying Prop 2.5 is not a relevant piece of legislation for us. We don't have that as any kind of a guide. And we basically can tell those people that are having a hard time staying in town because they can't afford to stay in town, it's been nice knowing you, but you need to go find a cheaper town because we want to turn ourselves into Wellesley or something like that. And so that's kind of where, it's kind of a strategic question for me around what is the course the town sails from a financial standpoint? And I don't have a full answer to that. What I did, just to fill you in, I sent you the copy of the kind of reformatted budget, and we can talk, in fact, I have an update for you on that one even, but the issue around this, and this was actually a topic that was discussed at the Mass Municipal Selectmen's Meeting. It was in the context of school budgeting, but there are a significant number of towns that have actually gone out and have adopted this kind of a framework. And what it really does is it recognizes there's some expenses we have that we don't really have a lot of choice about. Employee and town benefits, you pay for whatever they are, and health care and pension costs are going to put pressure. Certainly we have to pay whatever we borrow, we have to pay and do something with. We have other things, like for me, I think we've moved the OPEB into an automatic thing that we're doing. Last year, when the funding for the development of the state hospital got shot down at town meeting, because many people kind of grumbled and said, we put enough money into the state hospital, it's not developed yet, I'm not going to spend another dime. Well, that's fine from a development standpoint, even though you just pushed development out for another year and you just picked up another year's worth of maintenance costs. It's not an option for us not to maintain the property. So that got me on thinking about certain cost categories that we have in town you really don't have a choice about. And so those all got moved up to the top part, and then it's kind of a matter of just calculating through what the allowable or projected revenue is under Prop 2.5, and then figuring out the distribution between how much money can go into the town budgets and how much can go into the school budgets, and without an override. And my intention is to shine clear visibility on what it is that's driving the override. So that's where I was going. Now, you saw the draft that I sent out, and on that draft, I basically did a 1/3, 2/3 split. So the school side would be twice as big as the town side, but I just picked that number out of the air. And so what I did, I asked myself a question, which was, well, so what should the split be? And I spent more time today than I expected to on the question, but what I did, and I'll pass these out to the three of you and to you, Mark, I went through, believe it or not, I have a notebook with the last 10 years of warrant articles in it, so it's easy for me to get this stuff. I went into the warrant article, took a look at the funding by the major categories that were reported in the warrant article. So town departments, water department, sewer department, and those three things I classified as town side budget. And the reason I did that is because in our accounting, we're including the revenues that come in from water and sewer. So that meant I had to include the budget that we have for water and sewer, because you can't just claim the revenues with no cost. And then on top of that, we have transfers that come from water and sewer that go against some of those other categories, the employee benefits categories, the principal and interest. So basically that's blended in there, even though that's not part of the tax levy supported budget. And I discovered, so those three things are together on the town side. The school side is just school and vocational. And I discovered something I wasn't expecting to see. I went back all the way to FY10. I did the calculations of what the splits between those two segmented budgets were just for those categories. And to my surprise, we have had an incredibly consistent split without knowing. It's almost like we bobbled into a very consistent decision process with warrant committee trying to beat the schools down, schools trying to come in higher, town trying to hold itself down. A surprising split that 71% of the money that either goes to the town departments or the schools has, since FY10, gone to the schools, and 29% has gone to the town. Through all the turbulence and ups and downs, that's how the split has come out. So this first sheet that you see here,
And just to, not to interrupt, but I think Mike pulled out a sheet from like 1972, and it was basically the same.
yeah. So where I was going originally with this in terms of let's make sure we're shining the light on this shift in budgets, I still think it's important. The numbers I use for FY19 are all the numbers I use here are the warrant committee recommended numbers, so I did not adjust for the overrides from last year. I just take straight off the warrant report. What really surprised me as well is if you look at those, the yellow bars there are year-over-year growth. And interestingly enough, the year-over-year growth on the school side is not significantly out of whack with the year-over-year growth on the town side. I want to sit there and I want to sleep on this. I want to make sure I didn't do something stupid with my spreadsheet. I don't think I did. But
if you're taking, I mean, the one piece of it though, right, I mean, if you're taking this from the warrant report, the
Yep.
town budgets will include the benefits line.
no, the benefits are separate. I'll show you
took
that.
it out
in a
of this.
That's actually carried as a separate line in the warrant report. So there's town departments, but there's town and school employee benefits as a separate major
When
line.
Mike does the summary on the line, he always sums the benefits as a
Yeah,
town
that's,
budget.
that's off of there, but I'll show you that in a second. The other thing I did, just to double check, is I said, well, what if we just take town departments and just the school department, so not the VOTEC, just town and school, get all the other stuff out. And interestingly enough, you'll see on that blue line that that was a 25-75% split. So where I thought we were doing one, I thought we were on a trajectory in one direction. This tells me actually we're sitting steady in the water on where we're at. Now, you still got to figure out what you're going to do with all the growth, but that came as a total surprise to me. You go to the next page, so I said, well, if that's true, how come taxpayers are kind of, gnashing their teeth about the impact of taxes? Because that just says we've been going, in fact, if we've been able to grow on the town side, I don't think we even realized that the town budgets were necessarily going up 4%. And what's meaningful to me is that we've, in my head, at least when I've been on the warrant committee, I've always used the 2.5%, Prop 2.5% growth as kind of the line. And of course, that doesn't include new growth. So I suddenly sat there and said, actually, that 4% growth number for the two departments, maybe let's say 3.5 to 4%, that is not an impossible thing for us to handle as long as we're growing in the town, because it's not strictly 2.5% increase to the last year's tax levy. It's 2.5% increase plus new growth. And so that was interesting. But then I said, okay, well, if that's all true, why are taxpayers kind of feeling bad about how taxes are going? And so what I did then is I basically listed all of those major sections. So town and school employee benefits, town departments, debt and principal, vocational schools, school department, water and sewer, to get to a total operating budget. These came straight off the warrant report. I double-checked the totals. They match the warrant report. And that yellow bar you see is the percent growth of the budget from year to year, the total budget. What I was interested in was the next section down, which then takes those numbers and says, okay, what percent of the total budget do those numbers represent? And I think somebody's actually got my working copy, because I had it. So you keep it, because you got the highlights. I highlighted so I could do this. What this is showing is if you go all the way out to FY9, town and school employee benefits were 10.7% of the budget. Now they're in FY18, they were 18. I screwed that up. That should have been 19. Sorry, that whole bar is off one. FY10, it was 10.7%. FY19, 12.8%. And that's, 3% jump. That's kind of a big deal, or 2% jump is kind of a big deal with the size budgets we have. Town departments, they kind of went up and down, but no major change. Debt and principal, first it was high, then it went down, then it went up, and then it's going down. So that's why that's helped us for a couple of years. Vocational schools are inconsequential. And interestingly, the school department in FY10, 54% of the budget, FY19, 54.7 without the override. And then water and sewer, again, bobbling along. So from a taxpayer standpoint, what we've been hurt by is the growth in town and school employee benefits is a steady thing. And we get hurt in the years that our debt and principal service is higher and things feel a lot less painful when we're on a downward trend. So right now we're on a downward trend, except that in a couple of years we'll be on a radical upward trend. And so that's kind of, that plays into it. And then the other point having to do with taxpayers is this bottom part I did. What's the tax levy as a percent of the total budget? So in FY10, the tax levy as a percent of, this basically is capturing how much of this pain is due to the fact that the things that we used to get money for from outside of the town tax levy have gone away. In FY10, 73% of the total operating budget was paid for with the tax levy. In FY19, or FY18, because I didn't have the 19 number to do it with, 80%. And so if you look at a steady growth in town and school employee benefits, which just makes it worse, you have a variability in debt and principal that sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, so the taxpayers don't always feel the full impact of what we do. And then you realize that 7% of our entire budget has been shifted from outside revenue sources to.
And that's the reduction in state aid.
Yeah, yeah. And the reason I bring that up is I went to the public hearing for the school department, the budget last night, and you know they're wrestling with how do they get closer to the warrant committee's guidance, and I think I was anticipating being ready for a lot of tough discussions, and I realize actually the bigger factor that we're fighting here. This should not go back to the school committee to think that they don't have to keep working, but the bigger factors that we've been fighting here in town have had to do with that drop-off in non-tax levy funding and the benefits. And so at least at the end of this, I came away with a better sense of where the real enemies that we were fighting are. It didn't help me know. I don't know the answer, but at least I know not to go after the wrong things.
The state has made a policy decision apparently to transfer more of our costs to the towns and their
Yeah.
property tax base.
Yeah, it's not a surprise, but what I'm getting at is the battle we're fighting is, we ought to at least know what the enemy is that we're facing, and that's, the bigger enemy is that kind of stuff, not profligate departments or anything like that. Just for your information, this, I just redid this, the same thing you've already gotten, but I'll give you an update. The numbers at the bottom are still no better than they were in terms of reliability, but what I did do, what I did do is I changed the factor, so the 1/3, 2/3 split, I just did it as a 71%, 29% split. And that actually, the problem that appeared to be there with the 1/3, 2/3 split, which I'm saying is not yet valid, it flipped. And I'm still saying that those bottom line numbers are not yet valid, but it gives you some sense of the sensitivity around change the factor, and all of a sudden the problem, the mouse under the rug goes to a different place. So I hope that at least helps us a little bit in thinking about what we're dealing with here. And I will welcome, if you do take any time to this, if you see any flaws in my thinking in terms of the math, tell me. I tried to check the equations and stuff to make sure that was right, but I was not expecting to get the insights I got today, which is why I spent more time on this than I had planned. That's it.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to double check your math sitting here, but I mean, you know, I think you're correct as far as the diagnosis, right? I mean, this is sort of a known. If you take this even further back, if you look on the sheet that Mike gives us every year, I mean, the percentage of the budget that was from outside sources was even higher. If you look back to 1985 or that period of time, it was much higher. And you know, you're coming into a period here in FY10 off of, you know, a decade when I think there were 5 overrides between 2000 and 2010, and so you had a jump up in that period of time. I mean, it's you know, I don't think there's any profligate departments, right? There's places we can cut, right? There's places we can cut, but most of the things we're going to be cutting are things for which somebody can make a ridiculous case for why we should have them, right? Like, I could sit in the school budget, I could cut out plenty of stuff in there, and I could get a bunch of people who could march in there and say, here's why this is good, here's why this is good, here's this, my kid loves this, my kid loves that, this is great, and all of that. So I mean, I think in any of these decisions we're making, the reason they're hard decisions is because there's not a lot of, there's not $100,000 in there for marshmallows. Right. I mean, the reasons why it's a difficult choice to make is we're not choosing between something that's obviously useless to everyone, but it's just there for some reason, and stuff that is necessary. And that's, and I think to your point, I mean, there certainly was a lot of concern in town about the tax issue, but all of the overrides passed, and fairly overwhelmingly. And so I think one of the reasons why the pain is felt more acutely is that the property taxes, which are regressive, are rising independent of people's wages and income. And so if you look at wage and income growth, I mean, one of the things I've looked at kind of when I'm sort of noodling on this stuff is when you compare town to town, right? You compare the property taxes in one town to the property tax in another. And one of the interesting things to look at is also comparing the property taxes as a percentage of the median income. Right, if you take the median income of the town and divide the total property taxes against it, it's an interesting number, and it's interesting the way it comes out. And our taxes are much higher, if you look at it on an absolute basis. If you look at it as a percentage of median income, it's lower than a lot of towns, right? And I think that drives the decisions that people make. And I think to your overall strategic point, and some of it is out of our hands. We're limited by what the legislature will let us do. But it does, it does drive the town towards much less socioeconomic diversity than we already have, and I think that's unfortunate in a lot of ways.
There's another factor too, and I actually just haven't found the statistic or the table that I want. The other factor has to do with what percent of the total tax levy is paid through personal residential property. So we compare ourselves with other towns, and we compare ourselves how much money we're putting into education or anything else, and it's like, but if you adjusted that for what percent of the total expenditure is being shouldered by resident owners, house owners, all of a sudden that picture would look a whole lot different in terms of what's the actual contribution that the citizens of the town are making who live here toward actually paying for their town services.
And we're very high on that ratio as well. If you look at our comparator towns, we're at almost near the highest point of we're 94%, and even if you take that down to 80%, that makes a huge difference in the fiscal impact that people have. And the other thing is we have obviously a huge percentage of households have kids, which is great, and it's a great thing about being in this town. But that number is very high, right? If you take our comparator towns, that number is higher than everybody else's. Our percentage of residential is higher than everybody else's, and that results in a higher tax bill. And one of the bad pieces of news about this, right, as well, is that even as the debt in principle is going down, the amount of tax relief that's reflected in that is less, right? Because a lot of that debt in principle now is paid for by the MSBA, and I would imagine that some amount of this decrease, right, from 73% to 80%, some of that is the decreased use of the MSBA funds. Right, because we had under the MSBA schedule when we refinanced that in 2008, I mean, under that table, we used more of it in the early years. And so as we head near to the end, it's going to be good to have the debt roll off, but in terms of the actual relief to the taxpayers, I think it's about $1.8 million a year that we pay in the debt on the schools, only about $800,000 of that is actually borne by the taxpayers, because the rest comes out of the MSBA fund, which goes out as well. Pete, thoughts?
I guess my basic underlying thought is that it's most of the town budget is for personnel. So you make your decision about how many police, how many firefighters, how many teachers you're going to have, and that drives your budgets. So they're really just policy decisions about how many people you're going to have per shift.
Well, the flip side is then to start thinking harder about the revenue side. And I push for the diversification I think a lot of people have. I've also toyed with the idea, should we take a hard look at the assets that the town owns and look at, I'm thinking particularly for some of the if we're looking at financing, we're going to have a school we're going to finance, so that downward trend in the interest rates is going to spike up, and I keep trying to visualize how anywhere in the next, I'll say 10 years, any other major capital construction project is likely to make much headway with us or with the taxpayers. So but let's say it does, or let's say there's something that's important, because we have issues. We got to figure out what we're going to do with the state hospital, for example. Whether we have to start taking a look at some of the assets that we have. I'm not talking about open space, but I'm talking about other assets that we have, not as just a pool of land that's there to sit there, but actually as an asset that we may want to use to pay for some of the kinds of capital expenditures that if we're trying to figure out a way to get around a new school without getting things disastrous, maybe there's a way to
We
start
don't have a lot of-
liquidating assets.
We don't have a lot of assets that we can use. I mean, the town has bought most land as conservation land, and you can't do anything with that at this point.
Which is why I pushed the State Hospital Master Planning Committee not to just write off the lots that are like over on the other side of Hinckley property as urban wild, because they're actually developable lots. It's why we have land to the left of the State Hospital that conceivably could be done something with. No, I know, no, I'm saying, no, I'm not saying it's conservation land. I'm saying we have some assets in town that are in fact saleable assets if we want to use them that way. Some of them, like that thing with Hinckley, I think Mike's original plan was to, let's see whether there's adjacent land that would make it more valuable. So I'm not arguing that we need to do something right away. I'm saying that's maybe something we have to look at if the alternative is just to put full stop on all the capital construction outside of a school for the next 10 years or something like that. If it's important enough to do it.
Federal government's not helping you either with there. I've already left $2,000 of property tax on the table in my taxes this year, so.
Well, that's okay. They'll get you for the other $1,200 when you sell your house bill with that new transfer tax for the.
I'm going to be very interested to see how many school children we end up with at the Larkin property on Hospital Road. A lot of those are selling now, I've noticed, and a lot of people, there are a lot of lights on at night now. People are living there. If it follows the pattern of the Glover Place, there won't be very many school children in that, and those could then be money makers like Old Village Square are for the town. So that's that whole concept of building housing in a form that is revenue positive for the town.
So Pete.
That's not one that we chose to develop, but we got it thrust upon us.
And here's where my head's going. I know it's a budget discussion we're having, but what I find myself asking, quite aside from the dollars, is how are we defining Medfield for the future? And I totally sympathize with the point that if you put up really expensive homes suitable for people who don't have kids, then they become a cash benefit to the town. But those expensive homes, whether we're talking about Harding or Hospital Road, or whether we're talking about the one on down from Randy's there, do we really want a town full of $1 million homes? Is that where we're going? House prices have doubled from my house is worth more than twice what it was when I moved in 23 years ago, and I'm really happy about that. And I wouldn't want it to go back down. But the thing is, at some point, if what we're doing and what we're making decisions on, we're going to invest in the schools because the schools are going to drive real estate prices, and the real estate prices already have us driven to $600,000, $750,000 median price. Where do you go next? And what it is you turn into a community of $1 million homes, and that's fine. That's not the Medfield that I moved to.
There was that analysis that Kathy McCabe did of the Lot 3 land, which showed that as a housing development, a 42-unit housing development, it returned 2 or 3 times more than it would to the town in taxes than if it was done as a commercial development.
And I would be on board with that if we didn't have so much commercial property that we need to develop.
But there's a type of housing, it's not, $1 million homes. That was 42 units in a elevator building, I assume. But that would be the type of housing that would return profit to the town, and it's not $1 million homes. So, there are.
Well, yeah,
there
if
are
we want to
options.
build a lot of apartment complexes like that, I agree. We have a certain need for affordable housing, and we have a need for senior housing, and I agree with that. But that, first and foremost, isn't a financial transaction. That's trying to meet the needs, in one case, to comply with the law, and the other one to meet the needs of people in town. So I don't see that as a strategy for, across the board, to improve the town's financial footing relative to its school costs.
So the other area where you can increase the return is with these accessory dwelling units that I was talking about. The people across from the street from me added an in-law unit, and they basically brought in a small modular house and attached it to their house. I saw in the Hometown Weekly this week all the assessments, and their assessment had bumped up a couple $100,000 because of that addition to their house. It's lived in by the parents of one of the people that live in the big side. So there's a 200,000 times whatever our tax rate is. So there's maybe 3,000 extra tax money coming to the town from that lot as a result of that change, that accessory dwelling unit on that property. And it gets back to the question that you're asking: what sort of town do you want to have? There's certainly going to be all this continued pressure to make use of any of the land in Medfield. It's hugely valuable to build a building, to build a dwelling unit here, so that any land that becomes available, anybody that can add an extra dwelling unit is going to try to do it.
Well, and so I'm not, I buy the basic idea that one of our options is to find higher value housing that doesn't tend to have school kids. I'm okay with that, but that's not as the sole strategy. I like the idea of the accessory dwelling units, partially for taxes, but partially if that makes it easier, having gone through two mothers that needed help at the latter part of their lives, if there was a way to make that easier for people.
Yeah, I think that adds
I think that's great. I think diversifying the tax base, though, is every bit as important, because if you're still fundamentally a 95%, personal residence taxed entity, I don't think we ever really get out of this.
Right. The issue is, of course, what do you have control over, right? Like, I think a lot of people would say it would be great. We would love to make the state hospital mostly commercial. You get a lot of support for that. The reality is, all the evidence we have is that there's zero market demand for it, right? And we don't have any evidence of significant market demand for the kind of commercial development that's really gonna move the needle, right? And I think
I'm not sure that's true. They had when the master planning committee looked at things, they uncovered opportunities to do stuff. Most of it wasn't actually traditional opportunities. So I sometimes worry that when we talk about commercial space, the assumption is commercial office space, and who wants offices
that's not
there?
my assumption at all.
Okay,
My assumption is commercial is non-residential. And I think the feedback we got from the RFI was even more bearish on commercial development at the state hospital. And the reality is, the only places in town where you're gonna get a significant commercial development is if you can find 20 acres that's on Route 27 or 109, right? And even then, if you look at all the trends in commercial development, there's not a lot of appetite for commercial development that has to be driven to over long distances, right? And so we're far away from a train station, we're far away from a highway, and all that's great. A lot of people move here for that reason. But, I mean, the age of kind of the super valuable strip mall is past a little bit. And so that's all I'm saying, is that I think what you're saying is correct. I don't think there's that much we can do from a government standpoint, other than as part of this master planning process, looking again at our zoning rules to see if there are tracts of land on those roads where you may be able to do something useful commercially. Because we can't just sort of decree that we'd like commercial development here, developers of the world, please come and build in this location we've dictated to you.
I don't think we even seriously explored it, and I think we have a reputation of not being receptive to it. And the reason I don't agree with you on the conclusion is because, mysteriously, every town around us has been able to have commercial development. It's only Medfield that's the one bridge too far in every single direction. And I'm not talking about, I don't expect it to look like Needham on Highland Avenue. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying we so quickly discount any possibility of commercial development, and we don't even try.
Well, I mean, again, what do you define trying? By dictating to a developer, you must build in this location, or by saying we're going to expand the zoning rules and say you can zone more land for commercial? That seems to me the way you're open to it is by removing some of the restrictions on development, because a lot of our zoning rules don't fit 2019.
So I'm good with that. I think there's probably some things we can do that can improve our reputation at being more open to commercial development.
So,
And that doesn't mean putting money into it, it just means people that might look at stuff. I think we can probably do some more things through the town, through the state, that, around getting help from the state for development. And, you know, I don't have somebody who wants to move in and put their college campus up at the state hospital, but.
no tax revenue.
Well, then it's a good thing I don't have that, but, well, my point is, I don't have the total, you know, EMC didn't say they wanted to move from Hopkinton or Holliston or move in from Milford to get in closer to the center of Boston with a corporate campus either.
But the reality is, I mean, to your point, most of the towns around us are that much closer to the highway or to a train station. Right, I mean, Dover and Sherburne, they haven't put in a lot of commercial development. I mean, Millis has a little bit more commercial development than we do, but not a materially more, and they have what we don't have, which is, I mean, one of the nice things is we have lots of houses along 109. Millis has large tracts of land along 109, and they still haven't, you know, that shingle factory has been under discussion for things for a long time, and not much has happened.
One of the marketing studies that they did.
You need a microphone, Bill.
So one of the marketing studies that was done, they looked at the other towns, and that's how they determined what the demand was in Medfield. I mean, pretty much that there was not any additional demand for new stuff, new commercial, you know, enterprises in the other towns around us, and they were pretty
But
much.
what kind of commercial enterprises were they talking about?
Well, off the top of my head, I don't know, but you can
I mean,
check them.
if you're looking at Millis, you're probably looking at retail. And I understand why people might not go to the state hospital.
And that's
for
pretty
retail.
much one of the things that they looked at, because one of the options that was put up for everybody was, would you like some kind of a retail shopping mall there? That wasn't there. I mean, office space, whether it was medical office space or what, was another one of the things that they looked at. And there didn't seem to be much demand for that, you know, that was unmet in the surrounding area.
And yet we have lots of medical annexes that are being built out and expanded in a lot of different places.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them that are going with empty rents in them too, so.
So one of our historic anecdotal issues was the, where the Montrose School is now. There was about 12 acres of land zoned for business and industry, and the town was unwilling to change the zoning to allow the use that the market wanted, which was mixed use, retail on the first floor, residential on the next two floors. So the marketplace tried to find a use for that would fit the zoning for a couple of years, and they couldn't find it, so we ended up with a school that is exempt from zoning. We lost $150,000 a year in tax revenue that we used to be getting, and it's, I mean, it's a very nice property, it looks nice, but it doesn't produce any revenue for the town, and that's 12 acres in our downtown that could be producing a lot of revenue.
Right, and I know that the owner of that location tried very hard to get another commercial use in there before. I mean, he settled to sell it to the school because he couldn't get another tenant, right? Because where did they move? They moved to Needham to be closer to the highway and closer to the train station. So I don't disagree with anything you're saying.
Yep.
I just think in terms of actual planning and strategy and counting on that being successful, I'm a skeptic. I'm happy to do anything from a regulatory standpoint and from an encouragement standpoint that we can do to be friendlier to business. And so if we have businesses who have found us difficult to deal with, we shouldn't make ourselves difficult to deal with, but we do not have the kinds of tracts of land in the more attractive places, I don't think. I mean, it would be great if you could develop the old town dump, but I don't think you're building anything on that other than solar panels, right? That's a premium piece of property that you could actually do something with, but it's not, it's off the table for environmental reasons. We just don't have those. We don't have those kinds of, and I think there are places, in the hospital, there are things I think we can do from a commercial standpoint, and that we should talk about it when we get the hospital on the agenda, where there are uses that I think that are not currently in the plan that may be able to be in the plan that would be more successful.
When I look at the hospital, I look at, you know, the possibilities are probably not the standard possibilities. It's more, who is it that would want to have something up there? Precisely because it's unique, precisely because it's out, you know, easy access to rivers and everything. I come up with, if you have a creative company that's looking for a place, we need creativity, we're having a hard time getting people to come in, bring them into a community that's got a top school, but if you want to take your kayak out on the river for lunch, you can do that. So I go in the direction of high tech and not large scale not EMC, but more creative. And I could be wrong. I just don't think we really even are kicking the can over to see if there's anything to do with it. And if we don't, and if it's strictly residential, I see why the developers all want that, because that's an easy way to make money. But if we have, let's start with 400 units. We're not there with the master plan, but that was a number. Well, 400 units, at minimum, probably adds 1,000 people to the town. If it's 500 or 600 units, it probably adds 2,000 people to the town. So my question is that what we at Medfield, do we actually want to go from being a 12,000 person town to starting to close in on 15,000 to 20,000 person town? Because that changes what the town is. And I'm not arguing for a specific answer. I'm just saying when we look at dollars and we look at budgets, I find my head going more in that direction because of the implications of where some of our trends are in spending.
So one of the changes in town that I've noticed when I was a soccer coach, so maybe 10, 12 years ago, one of the parents told me that his company, he was explaining to me, he was a salesperson of some sort, and I asked him where his office was, and he said that he worked out of his home because his company didn't want to provide him an office. And so all of a sudden I started realizing that there are a huge number of people in Medfield who are working out of their homes because their businesses don't want to have them come into an office that they then have to pay for. I don't see exactly how you monetize that as a municipality, but it strikes me that it's a huge change in the way that the town has operated.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you do something with some of these kind of co-op office space, maybe there's not a company that goes in there, but if you suddenly have office space which can be gotten cheaply for people who are working home but don't want to actually have to give up a bedroom to do it, there's potential there. I just read today, there was an article that state of Vermont it's a limited budget to do it, but they're actually offering $10,000 to people who will move to Vermont and be basically telecommuters. They give it to them $5,000 a year over a 2-year period. But Vermont, because of their population drop-off, is trying to get people to come there. But what they want them to do is move and then be telecommuters in Vermont, and they'll give them $10,000 if they'll do it.
State senator from out west in Massachusetts is proposing the same thing for Pittsfield in that area of Massachusetts. Yeah. It's modeled on the Vermont program. So, I mean, I think all of these are good points, and I think it's got to factor in when we talk about the hospital. My only skepticism is just around, I don't want to count on any of that additional revenue as we plan about these things, right? Because it may come, it may not, but it's likely we're going to have another recession at some point in the next few years, which will put the brakes on a lot of that kind of development too. So, we'll see. Further thoughts on the budget and what we should discuss tonight. I mean, I think I read through what was posted from the school budget. Gus, you went to the hearing last night. Pete, did you go last night? I don't know if you went last night or not. But any reactions? I know you said it was not. You weren't as angry as you thought you were going to be. So
It was not that I wasn't angry. I mean, today, it wasn't that I expected to be angry, but I was expecting there'd be a vigorous debate about what the number needed to be, and I was anticipating that number would drive us to an override that I didn't want to see us go to. So that's really what it boiled down to.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for the school committee. There are a couple things that came out for me. They did approve a budget. It's the one that we have in the sheet, the $36.6 million budget. And they did recognize that the budget for Jeremy here from the warrant committee, they did recognize that this is the first budget and it's still a fluid thing and that things change over time. So they weren't like sitting there saying they're going to hold their breath till they turn blue on that budget. The two things that stuck in my mind that they brought up, that part of their message, I think, was some of our costs are uncontrollable, kind of like what we're saying. And the two things that jumped out at me was one, Framingham's withdrawal from the transportation pool as the biggest partner in that pool. Suddenly, all the rest of the towns are left holding the bag for the total cost, and so that's been a hit. And then just special education funding in general. You know, if students need things and they're going places outside of the system, there's not a lot that Medfield can do to control that other than pay it, because that's what they're required to do. So.
And I think the other big thing with the schools is that they've discovered the whole social emotional issue and that they need to spend money to do that. The schools are a microcosm of our communities, and our communities have all these social, emotional issues that we have to deal with, so they have to deal with them too.
This town this again gets back to what the town wants to be. This is a personal opinion, but on one hand, and I'm not picking on the schools, but the school is a good place for magnifying glasses. On one hand, we have a town with parents who want a school system that produces top producing students, that makes them highly competitive for, the colleges that they apply to. And in order to do that, they push for advanced placement, honors courses, all the credentials that would improve your chances for getting into a college. And on the other hand, we have a social and emotional task force that's looking at how to reduce stress. And so you kind of like have two sides of a seesaw, and instead of figuring out where you want the seesaw to be, we're loading more weight on each side, but we're not reconciling the fundamental problem of how do we get our kids to understand the most important thing you can learn is how to discover who you are and figure out how you want to live your life, not to learn that here's the checklist of the things that you do to position yourself in a certain way. So do this, 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 and this. You may not find any value in it, but it's going to be really important. It's the heart of your life that I'm not sure comes through sometimes.
Mr. Marie, is that going to be on the test?
You know what I'm saying? It's we got costs going up in both directions.
That's the biggest thing, if we could teach them how to be successful citizens in the future.
And I won't get us even further off on a tangent. I will point out, though, given a lot of the research.
The expert here at this table,
well,
incidentally.
I will point out on that same front that given all the research on the impact of phones and screens and social media on kids, we did decide pretty much on a whim to force every kid to get an iPad about 6 years ago. And so, and then people are going to worry about how much time they're spending on the iPads that they're forced to have for school. But we won't get further. They have to have it all the way through. That's how they do it now. So, anyway, we won't get further off on that. And direct your angry calls to me on that point, everyone. All right, so I think on this budget, Jeremy, any thoughts from a warrant committee perspective? I know you're just working on this. I think from a practical standpoint, given the increase in the employee benefits number, this is a budget from the schools that would require an override vote. I think there's no way, absent significant cuts in town side budgets, there's no way you get to a 4.85% increase you don't even get to a 4% increase without an override vote. And so I think that the highest increase you could have with an override is probably a 2% increase, because if you look at our revenue growth, that can be that has to go towards the benefits number. It's about 45% of our new revenue growth. And each 1% increase in the school budget is about $350,000. And so we have about $1.4 million in new potential revenue. So I think as we move through this process, it may be that the revenue numbers change. If the revenue numbers don't change, you're probably looking at it, just as last year, a 4% budget increase required an override, the 4% increase would require an override this year too. And so we got to have that discussion at some point. But I think just from a math standpoint, that's what the math is.
So to that point, when you look at the thing I just gave you, the burden of that shifts, given the difference in the split, the burden shifts in the direction of the town. The numbers are worse than for sure the numbers are worse than they should be for two reasons that I can think of, one of which is we haven't fully accounted for the transfer. What we haven't accounted for is the water and sewer contribution to, not the benefits. We get the benefits in there, but there's one other category. It's on the sheet. I guess it's principal and interest. I think we don't have for the enterprise fund loans that are showing up as part of our debt service, but I haven't allocated that there. So that's one piece, and then the other piece is, I think the way this is set up, we probably need to know Chapter 90 funds, and we don't have that. So the numbers, the picture that you see there is worse than it really is, but the problem doesn't completely go away. But part of the problem that you see on the school side will decrease in a 71-29% split on that. sheet when we add that in.
But you're allocating, just so I understand your sheet here, the 7129 between, on the total numbers, not just on the
No,
increase.
no, so if you look on that second page, what happens is I take all those kind of what I'm calling non-discretionary expenditures, I'm taking that off the projected general revenues to the town. What's left, I then split, so in this case, in that version, I split 71.29%, and then I add in Chapter 90, and it would be Chapter 90 revolving funds. There's a bunch of categories that would be town side revenue sources, and Chapter 70 and revolving funds and other things that are school side revenue sources on the other side. So if I get the accounting right, then that becomes a really useful tool. Until the accounting's right, it gets,
Right.
it can give us bad bottom line conclusions.
Right. So I think, I mean, obviously, it's not for sure that we need an override in that situation, but we just have to keep that in mind. Because I think one of the reasons last year came as such a surprise to everyone is in last year's budget process, I think the school committee was of the view that if you got to a 4% budget number, you would not need an operating override, which was never true based on the math in last year's budget, right? Because even when the warrant committee came out with its recommended 4% increase, that was still going to be $1 million operating override. And so I just want to make sure, Christine, as we go through the process, that the school committee is clear on what the overall implication is of the budget. Not that however it shakes out, but we should get ahead of it this year rather than be behind it. Because I think it came as a surprise to everyone last year that, oh gee, we didn't think we'd need an override if we got to 4%, but we only need an override, when we were so far off last year that, I mean, the non-override increase last year would have been a 1.8% increase in the school budget. And so we need to make sure that everybody from the warrant committee, the school committee, is on the same page as to what the reality is numbers-wise.
That was clear from the discussion last night at the warrant committee.
And I can say at the public hearing last night, there's still that kind of assumed perspective that 4% is what it takes for us not to have an override. However, just so you know, they also are very mindful of the guidance from the warrant committee of 3%, so they haven't discounted. It's not like they're saying, well, those guys don't know what they're doing. They get it.
Right, and obviously, we're going to have to look hard at all of our town side budgets as well. I mean, it's not to suggest we're just going to rubber stamp every budget we have on the town side. And I've said this before, and there's no law of nature that budgets always have to go up by some percentage, right? I mean, it would be great if you can find ways that as things change, technology changes, the needs change, we find ways to spend less on things that we had to spend more on in the past. And so it's not always the situation where you just have to deal with new costs coming in. There should be some savings and some reallocation, and to our earlier discussion, some difficult choices between things that seem to be nice to have, but if it's just a nice to have versus a need, maybe we have to drop the nice to have. And so I think I think on the town side budgets, it ultimately falls to Christine and to us to make those judgments between the budgets and how that all shakes out. Do we really need it versus, again, I don't see a lot of profligacy or waste or money in the school budget that's just kind of frolics and detours, right? I mean, anyone could say, I don't like this or I don't like that, but, I don't see a ton in there that's, my gosh, I can't believe they're just, there's no $12,000 toilet seat in that budget. So, at least not as far as I can tell. Maybe if you really drill down. Okay, so that's enough budget talk for now. We'll take this up again next week. We'll have the facilities budget in. In connection with that, our next topic is the goals for the town administrator from now through June of 2019. And so, Gus, is this your document?
No, that was mine.
That's your document, okay. So I handed out my 4 bullet points of potential goals for this discussion, and these are Christine's goals. I do see some overlap between them. And so, Pete and Gus, you want to just take a look at these for a minute, and then we can chat about how this all shakes out. Now, I was mindful in the ones that I put together, we only have 6 months and all of that, but I think we do want to get us on a calendar of setting goals and then reviewing our progress towards those goals.
Chris, what's your human resources one, that number 3, 19/medical audits?
Oh, it's actually I-9 medical audit of our HR files.
I have no idea what that means.
You're not allowed to keep your I-9s within your personnel folders, so they all need to be taken out and kept in the safe in the town clerk's office. You're not allowed to keep them
Is the
within
I-9
your
where you
proof of
declare a
citizenship.
number of
Yeah.
exemptions?
No, your proof of citizenship.
Oh.
And that's part of it. We'd like to move to an automated HRIS system. So the first step is auditing what your existing paper files are.
Okay.
I'm ready whenever.
Pete, let us know when you're ready.
Oh, anytime.
All right.
Sorry.
Thoughts?
Well, I guess my thought is that I think you've both done excellent lists. I mean, my sort of goals, I think, for Chris were to try to move more towards systematizing the operation of the town government, move away from the ad hoc to more of the, here are our policies and protocols and how we're going to do things. I think that you're going to have a lot of issues in terms of people. Just the hires, the new hires, especially with Matt leaving, so that I think that, you know, if you can solve the hire issues that you've got in the next 6 months and restructure things around the people that you're going to hire in the ways that you want things to operate, I think that's a huge part of it. And for me, I guess anything that we can do to more systematize the budgeting process. I mean, I'm at a huge disadvantage because of these two gentlemen that have been as part of the warrant committee for so long, but I've always thought that we should have a better and a more systematic approach on the selectmen level to the town budget than we have. And it looks like you both seem to have that high on your priorities, so. I guess I'm looking to, as I say, just move away from the ad hoc, that annual calendar thing that I keep pushing to, so that we don't miss out on the different tasks that we should be doing every year, whatever it is, evaluating the town administrator or meeting with the auditors or whatever it is. I think that if we can just have a checklist, like Atul Gawande wants us to have for things, I think that we'll make sure that we get the things done in a better way then.
That's it. So first off, I would agree with Mike. I think your goals and Mike's are largely in sync, which is good news. And I think the goals are, they're all reasonable. The one I picked up that Mike had that you didn't have was the one around developing a proposal for reducing, limiting the cost of town employee benefits. And I guess we're not necessarily talking about, right? What I'm sensitive to is that can sound like, yeah, let's figure out ways to cut benefits. And I don't think that's what we're talking about. I think if we can find smarter ways, like as we've done with some of the, like the health, we've made improvements in healthcare. If there's ways, and I think there are ways to provide benefits that don't cost as much. In my experience, they're benefits, they don't actually cost as much, but what they do is they give people more flexibility to control what those benefits are or how they take advantage of those. And actually, people like the control enough that it winds up, it's a more cost-effective way of doing it. So just as, I don't think you were trying to just kind of slash and burn. It's the
No,
be smarter about it.
Yeah, I think the original thought on this, Michael LaFrancesca brought this up at one point. There's different incentives programs that the towns have that you could put voluntary, but that can be used to kind of defray some of these costs, either by encouraging people to move to other plans and incentivizing that sort of thing. So it's that, it's not saying we're gonna provide worse health insurance or worse stuff, it's like, is there stuff we can do? Can we look, because it is such a growing piece of our budget, right? It's not gonna stop.
Yeah, so given that, I actually think that's a good goal to have in there, but with that understanding, that's what we're talking about. The goal area that you had, that Mike didn't have, was in communication. And I think, part of me kind of says, well, the trajectory I've seen you putting us on in the last year as the assistant town administrator, and the comments I've heard from you, and even just the actions that I've seen in the last couple of months, I think you've got a pretty decent idea of the kinds of things you want to do there. And I think the things that you're doing there to increase ease of access for the public, if anybody really wants to get stuff, they can. And if we're smart about it, we can actually not only make that information more available to the public, but we can, because we've improved the ease of access to that information, we can actually make, like in my case, I don't absolutely need to have materials anymore because I know where to go on the website. So it's kind of like you go to more self-service where everybody knows where to go, and all of a sudden, not only do you get better access to information, it's a whole lot cheaper and a whole lot less complex to get that information to people. So I'm
As soon as we
thinking.
figure out the double siding thing, but we'll get there.
Okay, yeah. So that, I think, is a good one that also should be in there. You talk about filling the vacant position in town administration, certainly accounting, but town administration. Mike talked about assistant town administrator. I think Mike's comments, there's part of me that says, well, yeah, you definitely need to figure out who's going to do that. You've got to figure it out soon. I would hope that when you do that, you think about, the way I look at it is that there are 4 positions. There's a town administrator, there's an assistant town administrator, there's a finance director over in the schools. I shouldn't say superintendent because that's not right, but you basically, we have some ways to go. If there's a smart way to configure those roles, or a smarter way to configure those roles, I would encourage you to do that. If we can find ways to get you that kind of the person in the assistant town administrator role that gives you a draft choice to do this other thing that would be kind of what would be the most helpful thing to make it all work. Wherever that person falls or however the role is defined, I would hope we would do that before we just automatically plug in a replacement. And that's at your discretion. I'm not at your discretion.
Yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to make sure there was some flexibility there.
Yep.
If you want to call it something else.
Yeah, for what it's worth, you and Mike, both of your first bullets were both about the budget process, and I think Pete's like this too. I really could care less about excessive processizing of the budget process. I care a lot more about accuracy of information and ideally efficiency of the development, but I'm less concerned about procedure than I am about effectiveness. So that's just my personal reaction to that not be a bureaucratic goal, but that in fact it be a management goal to have us operate as a town in a more effective manner, whatever that happens to be. And then the one I would add, and I put it on the end of yours because you had the categories, I would add a personal development goal for you. And what I'm talking about here is you're looking over the next 6 months, 5 months, of stepping into this role, you know what parts of what Mike knew how to do, you don't know how to do as well as you'd like. You may need to get smarter about some of those things. You may need to continue to delegate some of the things you do know how to do to other people in order to free up that. So I think that's a big deal in the first 6 months, is actually to say, wait a minute, I have to critically look at myself, and I have to find a way to be methodical about working to fill in the holes that are of most concern to me. And part of that is I got to learn how to delegate pieces that I can do, but I have to get these off my plate in order to be able to do this other thing. And I think that actually should be on the goal. Not telling you what you have to do, but I think in the next 5-6 months, you need to.
You might find a new author for the town report this year.
Okay, that works. But I think that's important, especially because once the train's left the station for 6 months, it's all over. You own it all. So those are my comments.
So I think that's a good additional goal. So then would we be adding, taking to Christine's list, just adding the employee benefits piece and adding the personal development goal?
Yeah, and then reconcile the words, but I think you both were kind of saying the same things.
Yeah. Anything else, Pete?
No.
All right, so why don't we update that, Christine, and we can formally adopt the goals next week. Our goal list for you for the first 6 months, and then we'll review them in June.
If you do that when you update it, would you also include how you would like to be evaluated on those things? Those can be hard, that can be hard results, or it can be qualitative results, but just your idea, because 6 months from now, when we sit down, we're gonna sit there and wonder how we evaluate that, so.
We had looked at a series of evaluation forms last year, when we were talking about implementing it for Mike for this year, so I'll send those out again to you.
Okay. Less worried about the form and more about
How?
substance.
Yeah.
All right.
Holiday stroll budget update.
So you, the Board of Selectmen voted $3,000 for the holiday stroll update, and you gave some flexibility to the departments to make sure, obviously, we were going to be safe that night. At the very last minute, both police and fire decided we needed an additional light tower, where we were serving food in one of the areas, which was an additional $486. So I told the department heads I would bring it to your attention to see if you would increase your support and pay for the $486.
Sure. Fine with me. Pete?
Mm-hmm.
Can we get a motion?
I move that we increase our approved funding for the holiday stroll by $486 to cover the additional light tower.
Thank you. I think you
Second?
will find,
All in
sorry.
favor?
Aye.
I think you will find the department heads and Jean coming to ask for a little more money next year to do the barricades a little longer than they did this year. They thought just the additions they had this year were even more successful, and there's a couple areas they'd like to add them to.
All right, the regional 40B letter.
So the housing letter, there was a draft of the 40B housing letter that was the regional letter that I believe Pete brought back. We then circulated to Courtney, who made comments. We heard from the original towns that drafted the letter that they don't want any changes to that letter. The letter must go the way in which it was supplied to us. And they've sent a few emails out recently asking for us to finish that.
Pete, is this the regional selectmen?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
So we had taken the letter and given our own editorial comments to it, and they did not appreciate that.
They want everybody to get on
They want
board
everybody to
with
have the
same-
exact same letter, which
same
I understand.
message.
Pete, any thoughts?
It's fine with me to just send it the way that they want to have it sent.
I don't think I've seen it, so.
It was a while back,
It was from a while ago.
December.
It was in the packet? Really?
I don't know if it was in our packet.
I don't know if Evelyn had put it in the packet for this
I don't
week.
think she put it in our packet
I
again.
must have missed it, but first off, if Pete's okay with it, I'm okay with it, so.
Yeah. I liked Courtney's changes better, but
I did too, but I understand why they want to have everybody on the same.
Yeah.
It's too bad everybody just couldn't have adopted ours.
right.
They're not looking to do it until the spring, so we could, yeah, they probably don't want to change.
Okay, I'm fine, I know what it's about. I just.
Okay. So you want to have a motion to sign the letter?
Yeah, I move that we vote to approve signing the letter from the Regional Selectmen's Group in regard to 40B housing.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
All right, the Historical Society water bill. Once more, everyone.
All right. You want me to lead this discussion? I guess.
I am happy to have you start.
All right,
Pete, unless
so-
you'd prefer to start on this
Yeah.
one. No.
The only reason I asked is because I forwarded the email from Bill Harvey. So the long and the short of, we were holding off, trying to figure out what to do with this, what is it, $900-some water bill, pending hearing back from the Water and Sewer Department, what they were going to do. The short answer is in the reply from Bill Harvey, and I think they may have even consulted with you. The Water and Sewer Department have determined they're really not in a position, I think legally, they may not be in a position to simply say, well, okay, let's just write the bill off because somebody else is going to wind up paying for it. At any rate, for whatever reasons beyond that they decided, they basically said, we have elected not to give any relief on this particular bill. So that's, we're not going to get an easy answer out of Water and Sewer coming up with some particular solution.
I think it comes down to the fact they've got a minimum charge
Yeah, that's the problem.
And what
Yeah.
that amount is, and so therefore,
That's
you can't
exactly
make an exception for one, it's gonna apply across the board to everybody.
right. But in the case of this historical commission, they're not really using hardly any water. So the bigger part of their bill is the minimum charge to simply have the meter that's not doing anything. From my standpoint, it's not that the water and sewer department is wrong. And Mark, I have not seen the lease that they have, but.
It doesn't get into this, it
Okay.
simply says they're obligated for maintenance costs.
Okay. So I can see a couple of ways of dealing with this. One is we just sit there and tell the volunteers in town that are working to preserve Medfield's history that they just have to figure out some, extra fundraiser to cough up another $1,000 after they've already coughed up the money to replace the roof in the furnace. My inclination is not to do that. I think this group in particular, as volunteers, are providing a very important service to the town in allowing the town to, maintain its heritage and be cognizant of the history. The building they're in is certainly convenient for them. They signed a lease, said if you'll give us the building, we'd be delighted to be here. They're storing artifacts from the town there. But if they said, I tell you what, let's just go back to the deed of gift and just give us a free room at the library and we just won't pay for anything and we won't pay, we'll just use the library, and you take your building back, and do whatever you want with all the historical artifacts. I have a hard time picturing what we would then do as a town other than absorb costs like $150 a quarter or whatever it came out to for water. So
Is it $150 a year?
I should
I think it's
know.
$150 a
Yeah, it's
year.
$150 a year. So it's kind of.
It's like a 5 or 6 year bill for $1,000.
My inclination would be to say, give the library an extra $150 and tell them they have to pay the water bill that comes out. At least that's the town paying an enterprise fund an exorbitant amount of money for a meter that processes 30 gallons of water a year. That would be, and we just get this off the shoulders of the commission entirely. It's an aggravation. It's a small amount of money. They're playing an important role in the town. Mark, to your point around, not-for-profits, if they were only preserving a building, I would feel differently. I actually think they're doing an important thing for the town. And it's not the building that they're doing, it's the activities that they do and the education that they put on. And that's why I would prefer not to abuse volunteers. It's kind of the same way I felt about the garden club when they came and said, "Will you help us with the plants?" It's like, you guys are,
Well,
who's helping who here?
That's where my head went with this, right? Is that because I don't think it would be wrong to just sort of overrule the Water and Sewer Board and tell them, no, we're gonna tell you, you volunteer your time on the Water and Sewer Board, you have to make these decisions, so we're just gonna override you. I had, the garden club analogy was the exact analogy I had, and we paid that out of our Selectmen Downtown Improvement Fund. That's where I thought it would come from. I mean, it's in the downtown, it adds the vitality of the downtown, people go there, it's a building in the area, and so I thought that would be a reasonable way to do it, and then it's on us to consider future requests. It's not on the Water and Sewer Board to decide who they like more or less and who doesn't get to pay, right? I think it's procedurally better, and the water bill gets paid, and we don't have to change any policies at the water level. And
Will we have to pay the bill off on the installment plan out of the selectmen's budget?
I'm gonna see if I can get the interest waived, and then I'll get back to you.
can we pay through a town credit card so we can get like town frequent flyer miles or something out of it?
Anyway,
Yeah.
that would be a good answer as well. Anything that just gets that off
I'll
their
take care of it.
shoulders.
Okay, so we do. Pete, what do you think?
I think that's an excellent idea, Mike. What it raises for me was, well, there were two issues. One was they said council had told them that they couldn't, there was some DEP issue. I don't know if that was you, Mark, or, all right, so that's off the table then. But the other issue it raised for me is that apparently we have all kinds of town departments charging each other for water.
Well, you
Schools pay for-
have to do that
This
to
is the
some
enterprise.
degree to not have an Emerson situation. The town has to pay, the town cannot put on ratepayers its own operational costs.
Oh, all right, so then that takes care of that. Yep, so I like your idea.
Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I move that we transfer responsibility for the payment of the Historical Commission's water bill associated with the building that they use to, for the store artifacts and meat, to the responsibility, or to the Selectmen's discretionary account, to include the outstanding balance as adjusted by whatever interest reductions Christine is able to negotiate with water and sewer.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Maybe this one can come off the agenda.
Coming off the agenda.
All right, consent agenda, the only item on there, the Hannah Avenue Women's Club wants a one-day wine and malt beverage permit for their event on Thursday, March 14th, 2019 at the Zula Gallery.
Did we vote Roberta's?
No, I'll put it on the agenda for the next one.
Oh, that's the next one.
Yeah, I'll put it
Okay, yeah.
on the 5th.
We have a motion?
I move that we grant the license to Hannah Women's Club for a one-day wine and malt beverage permit for the event on Thursday, March 14th, to be held at the Zulu Gallery.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Going back to action items, Megan Sullivan, Chair of the Transfer Station Recycling Committee, requests us to vote to appoint Annette Wells to the Transfer Station and Recycling Committee. I think we have a letter from Ms. Wells. Any questions, concerns? Do we have a motion?
I move that we appoint Annette Wells as a member of the Transfer Station and Recycling Committee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we have a request to appoint Laurel Scotty of the Townwide Master Planning Committee. And Gus, I did get your thing about Sean Kay.
Yeah.
And this is purely an open meeting law hygiene issue.
Okay.
That we're supposed to have, when someone's up for an appointment to a committee, their name's supposed to be in the agenda.
That's
So I
fine.
told Christine, we'll put
We'll
it
do it
on
next week.
next
Yeah,
week.
that's fine.
I think he's
That's
great.
fine.
I'm glad that we
Yep.
have him. It's
Yep.
just purely, you know.
Nope, totally understand.
Laurel, I would encourage Laurel to apply. She comes to a lot of our Affordable
Yeah,
Housing
yeah.
Trust Committee. She's,
Had a good background, I thought.
yeah. She don't always agree with what she says, and she doesn't always agree with what I say, but she's always thoughtful, and she has a good perspective on it. So any further thoughts on that?
I
Motion?
move that we appoint Laurel Scotty as a member of the Townwide Master Planning Committee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we'll have Sean Kay on there for next week.
Okay, just so you know.
Okay, that's for me.
Yeah, that's for you.
Okay.
Good.
All right, Board of Selectmen action item list. Sorry, I have my copy of it here. I know we had talked about, we're gonna talk about this one tonight.
We talked about DPW, I think would be the target, yes?
Well, I thought you'd asked me to go through to pull out the ones for town administration,
Oh, okay, okay.
so I can do that.
And there's a lot of these that are done.
Yeah, so that's what I
Oh,
found when I was going through. So, regular meetings of department heads, we're having monthly meetings. Let's see, you hired a new town administrator by October 1st. I don't think we made the October 1st deadline, but it's done.
It was in process on
In
October
process,
1st,
yes.
right?
New police chief by January 1st. Right now, we're looking at holding a special selectmen's meeting on Tuesday, February 26th, to have our police chief interviews.
Tuesday, February 26th, I won't be here.
Then we
Out
will,
of town that entire week.
okay. I'll get back to you with a different date then.
Okay.
And I'm gone that
Um,
entire week, so.
I'll send out some dates. Would there be the possibility to do it on a non-Tuesday?
For me it is, yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
Just depends on which non-Tuesday.
I know.
All right, so we should probably just take the meeting on the 26th off the calendar.
I will take the
entirely,
meeting
yeah.
on the 26th off. Yep.
Thank you.
Um,
Good the following week, if that matters. and-
Yeah, I think we already have a meeting the following week.
You have a
Grab
meeting
my
on
calendar.
And I'm also good the previous week, if that helps.
that's school
We have a meeting
vacation
that
week?
We have a meeting on the 19th.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is, on this police chief process, from a scheduling standpoint, do you suspect we will have multiple people to interview, Christine?
I do.
Okay, and so, if that's the case, then, I mean, what do you think about having the interviews on the 19th with the idea that we then have a follow-up meeting to discuss the interviews and pick a candidate at a future meeting? When I had talked to Christine on the schedule, I didn't want to do it, kind of the whole thing during school vacation week.
Yep.
Just from
Yep.
if people want to come and participate, and I didn't want to have any questions raised that we were trying to do it when we knew lots of people wouldn't be here and the rest of it. And so, but if we're going to do the interviews that night and not make a decision that night, then the interviews would be available for everybody to see. In general, when we've done these interviews, they're not public hearings, so we interview the candidates, but we don't take questions from the audience. I think what we did with the fire chief, and I'd propose to do it this time, if people have questions they want us to ask, they can write them down, and we can consider asking them. But we wouldn't turn it into sort of a free-for-all public interview. And I'm happy to discuss that. I thought it worked well with the fire chief, but we can talk about that if either of you has a different view. I think if we're not going to do the hiring that night, have the interviews the 19th, and then maybe discuss it on the 5th, I think some of those concerns would not be as salient in my mind, because people could see the interview and then come and have a chance to be heard as to the actual appointment. But what do you think? Just looking at my calendar here.
I'll tell you what I'm wrestling with is, this is obviously a issue of interest to the public. So I don't know if this is a time when we would want to make it easier for the public to at least hear and see what's gone on, what goes on. So the alternative would be to go to the first week, probably the first, if we did it on a regular meeting, it would be the first Tuesday of March.
Right.
And we still wouldn't necessarily make the decision there, but it would be, no, I mean, I don't have a strong opinion either way. I'm expecting to be at both meetings. So
In March.
I'm more trying to be respectful of the public's
Yeah, me too.
interest in this issue, that's all.
So, Chris, what do you think of that? Beyond
Any way is fine with me.
Yeah, I'm just looking at, if we did it the 5th, if we did the interviews on the 5th, how is that going to work with the schedule of the candidates and the committee and all of that?
I will know better after the committee's actually meeting Thursday night at 5 o'clock for our final review of candidates. I will know better after that night what our schedule will look like.
Okay. Well, how about this then? If you're meeting Thursday, why don't you discuss with the committee the possibility of not having the interview until the 5th? And if they have a strongly negative reaction to that, we could try to move it up. I mean, you know, I don't think we should do the whole process during school vacation week. The week of the 11th is, I'm away the first part of that week, and I'm not sure we necessarily want to do it on Valentine's Day.
I don't think.
So. I will be during the day, yes, 2:30, I will be there. I will be there. Yeah, I mean, I could do it at 10 o'clock in the morning that day and probably not get in trouble, but.
Do you have them scheduled for that Medfield Valentine show that you guys
It's my relationship advice call-in show for that, on Medfield TV, kind of.
You know when we reach the late hour of 10 o'clock.
Yeah. So why don't we run it by the committee?
Let me talk to the committee on
and-
Thursday
and-
night.
And get a sense from the committee what they think, I mean, and the schedules of the candidates and all of that, and
Yeah.
we'll talk about this next week, and,
Yeah. Christine, if there's no sensitivity around that, I'm fine with doing it on the 19th.
yeah, but I think it's a good point, Gus. I think we want to maximize the opportunity for people to at least be here if they want to be.
Yep.
I think from a process standpoint, we could talk about whether we want to have it be, as we did with the fire chief, or have it,
Right, you can
open
make a decision on a
questions.
separate night.
We can decide how that goes. I thought it worked fine with the fire chief, but,
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I'll be in touch after our meeting on Thursday. Well, will I see you Thursday night? Are you going to Representative Garlick's State of the
I've got it down, yeah.
Town on Thursday night? Okay, so I should have an answer by Thursday evening then. Okay. Converting the town clerk to an appointed position, we
That's
attempted
off the
that.
list?
So that's off the list.
Can I just, in it's come up here, I just wanted to make one comment, and it's not urgent that we decide anything, but I want to put it on the table. Given that we got a clear confirmation that the taxpayers want the town clerk to be an elected position, that's all fine. The question I wanted to raise for us to think about is, given that, should we specify either a 3-year salary for the town clerk during a term of office or a 3-year progressive salary? And what I'm trying to get away from is that what we've done up till now is the town clerk has been in this kind of quasi-employee, not quasi, and gets treated like an employee in terms of, things about raises. And it seems to me that if you're an elected official,
I believe it's governed by statute. I
Is it?
believe it's a town meeting vote for elected officials to
Well,
set the salary.
well,
Town meeting sets the
that
salary,
part, that
yeah.
part may be true. I'm talking about the administration of that winds up turning into almost a negotiation or a discussion like any other town employee. What I'm getting at is, when you're gonna have an elected office and people are considering whether or not they wanna run for it, they ought to know what they're getting paid for doing it. And it ought to be up front. Now, it undoubtedly has to be approved, and it certainly is up for, if somebody wants to, get an adjustment at town meeting, they can, but I would set an expectation that says, look, here's the position, here's the pay. If you want to run for office, here's what you get paid. And there's a legal step that every year it has to be approved. We couldn't obligate the funds probably without going through that drill anyway, but all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it a more distinct position than kind of this person who gets elected and then gets treated like a town employee. Because it's, you got to be on one side of the fence or the other. So at least throw that out there for you to think about, if we want to do that, kind of lock it down a little bit differently than what we have in the past.
Okay. I can talk to the warrant committee about that as well.
Okay, thanks.
We're working on implementing policies to formalize our annual procedures. I think weekly written reports from the town administrator to residents. Weekly is too often.
Yeah, I would say, I am not, I kind of crossed off all of the written reports on this, just from the standpoint of, I get what you're getting at, Pete, and I get that there's some utility to that, but I'd like to see if there are kind of some technological ways we can provide information without having to take your time to writing a bunch of prose every week.
Right.
And the same thing is true for the fire chief and the police chief. I think we can think about, as we get better at using the website, get better at doing this stuff, we can find a way to push out information to people without it becoming kind of a weekly term paper for everybody in town hall. So I would be inclined to take all the reports off the list.
Yeah.
Okay.
But keep on there. I think we have one of your goals, Christine, that you've identified tonight for this, is to utilize those things and provide more information, more access to information, which I think is the goal of all those reports, Pete. Is that a fair?
I think that one of the things that Chris did, putting all the, of the budgets online this past week was a great improvement.
We've had a lot of good feedback from people who were able to see it, so it's good. And actually, all the revised budgets you didn't have tonight are online.
It's all right. Good.
And can I back us up on that implement policy? Because I would have done, I do one of two things. Implement policies, formalize annual procedures. That's such a vague and general, that's either just a statement of a responsibility that you have, or if there's something, on this action item list, this is selectmen, as I would see it, being very specific about wanting a department or someone in town to do a specific thing. So, we don't necessarily want it just to kind of have a general statement of a broad responsibility and say, you need to do it, because it doesn't help. But so I don't know whether this comes off or whether this should be made a lot more specific and focused about what specific thing are we talking about,
Right.
because it's so important.
Yeah.
We're not just gonna leave it up to you to do it, we're gonna tell you to do it.
So I would take this off this list because it's on the goals list for
Yeah,
Christine to
yeah.
prioritize the procedures. And to me, I think the best use of this list is, to your point, Gus, and a lot of the stuff that Pete has in there as well, kind of specific constituent service stuff, right? And there may be other things that are administrative things, but things that are, punch list items that, they're on the list and it can be dealt with from time to time. And I think, Pete, your concern too has been things just sort of fall off the radar. They get discussed.
Do not get done.
Right, and they don't get reminded, and it's the kind of thing, okay, if in this department head meeting, you're going over the list on a monthly basis, someone can say, you know what, we have extra time, or Mo can say, look, we've got some extra time coming up in the calendar, which one can we tick off this list, right? Here's something we can do, or this is something that we should keep in mind, just so it kind of stays there. And then, also that people who have those kind of constituent service requests can see that it's at least on someone's radar screen, and it's not just being ignored, right? Even if it's not getting done on the time frame that someone might prefer.
And then one of the other ones, this came out of a selectmen's meeting we had regarding the Board of Selectmen sign policy, but it got put on the list as review and update to the town's sign bylaw. That's a much bigger endeavor. I thought when we were at that meeting that we were starting with the Board of Selectmen sign procedure and then going from there.
So actually, I have a bunch of pictures that I took, and I will do a little work to organize this for us. I'm not,
Competition.
okay. What I did is one day I just a couple signs caught my attention, and I just drove through town with my phone, and I started taking bunches of pictures. And the intention behind it was to give you guys the sets of pictures having to do with sizes of signs, purposes of signs, locations of signs, not to say these are all bad, but simply to say, okay, here's the full spectrum of, what people are doing here in town. Which things do we want to actually go after? Which things do we not regulate? Which things do we not want to allow at all? And so I have that, I just haven't organized it, because I haven't felt like we ever had a meeting yet that has such
Are you talking about public ways or on private property?
all of it.
Because we've got a very restrictive bylaw as far as public ways. There's
Well,
now, I'm not saying
so
it's being enforced,
that's
but
what- yeah.
on its face, basically prohibits everything except for the informational stuff at a couple of specified locations.
Right.
Subject to our approval.
And enforcement is part of the issue. I mean, I don't, men with kilts disregards any rules we have. They're all over the place. And I don't think they're necessarily doing it because they just are defying authority. I think they look around, they see this kind of lax sign discipline everywhere, and it's like, gee, this is a good corner. Let's put our name up here. And so like in 5 corners in town, I had men, I don't know if they're still there, but they were. And it, we just got to get ourselves organized. And to include the enforcement, which might just involve having the highway department take things down. And if somebody says, where'd my sign go? We say, go see the highway department.
When John Naff was here, he would fill the back of his trunk once a week driving around, removing the signs when he was out early in the morning. And then when they called to complain to Evelyn that their sign was missing, they'd meet him in the back parking lot and have a sign discussion. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, we
And
can
that's
work on
commonly
that.
who does it in Franklin as well, the building
Yeah.
department.
Yeah. It's not being done a whole lot right now. Good.
Those are the only town administration ones that I had on my list.
Christine, are you updating, originally I had drafted and I had them, you now have it and you'll update this?
I can, yeah.
Okay, that's great, okay.
And a lot of these things too, I mean, are done, like the pavement management plan is done, the Metacomet sidewalk is done.
Yeah, a lot of these can be taken off.
A lot of these can be taken off because they've been
So
completed.
that's a minor policy question, so when we have completed anything, do we have any particular reason why we want to archive the completion, or do we just drop it?
I mean, it's in an Excel sheet, maybe you can move it to a completed
I
tab,
can move it to a completed tab.
so you can see what it is.
Yeah.
Like, for example, MSH
Start
need,
you.
MSH need to provide information to residents, I think we've got that all set. The
We're good
committee
on
did
that.
that, Lucille and all those do that. Master plan, housing production plan, those are all kind of done. The downtown study committee and economic development committee are both disbanded, so we don't need to integrate them anymore. So,
And unless you already eliminated the duplicates on your version of it, Christine, for whatever reason, I focused on DPW. In my head, I thought that was what we were gonna do. The sidewalk ones, there's duplicate ones unless you already got rid of them.
No, I didn't, I was only doing the town administration ones, so I'll look at those.
But you'll see there's actually Metacomet sidewalks on twice, Dale Street's twice, Green Street.
Okay.
Telephone poles is on, and I bet you may know, Some of these.
Colleen
some of
Sullivan
these-
even has.
Some of
on
these
the-
were taken
have
care of,
this
but you're the
list.
one who knew which poles in town had not yet
The
been
double poles.
fixed, the double poles, yeah. So I wasn't sure if these were complete or not. They're- not
So
sure.
Christine, I'll give you my notes on this as well. of the ones
Okay,
that I think
that'd be
are
great.
done.
Thank you.
And I will suggest that we delete the one building and grounds item, which was to resolve the dog poop problems in town, especially at Wheelock and Medfield State Hospital. This gets to my point about needing specificity on what it takes to solve that problem. So I'm guessing we maybe would, well, Pete, this was yours originally. Is there still something that we need somebody to specifically do around dog poop that's?
There's
That's
no,
always been an
Wait,
there's
enforcement.
no
it's-
enforcement I don't think the bylaw is right. John Thompson's group was looking to redo the bylaw, and they just haven't gotten around to doing it apparently.
Okay, so that's the, so is that the
There
action
needs
we
to be a
should
bylaw,
have
and then
now?
there needs to be
Revise the
enforcement.
bylaw?
Well, there is a bylaw, it's just, but it's never been enforced from day one, so.
I thought there was
There's
a bylaw
prohibition
issue
on-
as well.
There's a pooper scooper bylaw. And then there's a separate issue about whether you want to regulate dogs on property. Park and Rec, I believe, has a prohibition on dogs on at least some of their properties. So
So that's fine. The issue is, it sounds like it's a review of the bylaw, a revision of the bylaw, that then would specify the enforcement that's gonna come. So the next action is to revise the bylaw.
I thought that was the next issue.
All right.
I thought that John Thompson's group was gonna do that at the annual town meeting last year, but they opted not to.
I think they thought they were going far enough in one step with what they were trying to do last time.
they didn't reach consensus, and I had a different agenda for getting a dog bylaw updated, so I took it and ran with it. Frankly, the pooper scooper wasn't driving me, it was the vicious dog aspects.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right,
All right.
great. Selectmen report, Pete.
As I mentioned earlier, I went to the annual meeting of the Mass Municipal Association, two-day event, and let's see, I mentioned some of the takeaways. I went to one of the programs on DPW state grants, and I learned that Mass Works, which is where the money really is these days, I think the state has put all the old grants, the P-Web and the other things that they used to have into the Mass Works grants now. And what did they say, 81 million in 2018, 108 applications, 39 awards, range from 2 million to about 5 million, averaged about 2 million, I guess. The largest was 5. But it has to be for if it's for housing, I think it has to be for high-density housing, 4 units in an acre or more. And then there were these communities that were being built that were similar to what is being done by John Kelly up on Dale Street, where you have a central parking lot, and so you don't drive to your house. And these people seem to really like these developments. Now communities, Concord Riverwalk in Concord, Mass., Emerson Green in Danvers, Woodward Village in Carlisle. And you can build them bigger sizes, apparently. The man who did it, Dan Gainsborough, said it works best for like 8 to 12 or something units. But he's, one of these, the one in Carlisle, I guess, was like 120 units, but you just organize it around these units of 12 or something. And those were the big things, I guess. And then the other thing that I'd mention is that the Medfield Foundation is having its volunteer awards nomination period that is going to close on Thursday. So if you want to get a nomination in, go to the Medfield Foundation website, medfieldfoundation.org, and nominate your favorite volunteer. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Pete covered the Mass Municipal Annual Meeting, and I mentioned the Selectmen's Meeting with the discussion around school, budgeting of schools, which I found, I partly found it interesting to hear what they had to say, and I partly was happy to realize it wasn't just us that was wrestling with the issue, that, there are a lot of towns that are wrestling with it. I went to the public hearing last night, I already talked about that. We've talked about the budget framework. The State Hospital Development Committee is in the process now of conducting follow-up interviews with the respondents to try to develop a little more insight into what they were bringing up. They took your advice, I think, Mark, although I think we could have legally had them team up. They basically said, well, we'll stick with one for each, and, which is fine.
Safe approach.
I don't think we were really exposed to great risk if we'd had two people do it, but nonetheless, I think they're probably happy not to have to spend the time. We have, there were two developers that responded that were fundamentally saying, well, we don't do historic stuff, but we think we could really turn this into a great housing development if we just took everything down. So one person is talking with both of them to get a coherent picture of the alternative of not preserving the property, just so we have that as a benchmark, because we need that as a reference point. The Senior Housing Study Committee is going to be presenting at the COA next Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and is scheduled for the Planning Board on March 4th. So the plan is to do the presentation at the COA next Tuesday. Once that's happened, then the final report in all of its glory will be distributed to people. I think the Development Committee, for example, 3 of them have already been briefed on it through the Affordable Housing Trust, and so it's important to get that out to some people. And we'll see where that goes. And that's it.
So the Affordable Housing Trust's Board of Trustees, a couple of updates. Next Thursday, February 7th, we're going to have what is probably our final meeting with the Mayrock folks who are looking to develop the Legion site. That's going to be at, I think it's going to be room 125 in Medfield High School, our new favorite location for these meetings. And then we will be scheduling a meeting with the developer here. And so it's going to depend on how much homework the developer has to do before they're ready to come before the Board of Selectmen to ask for approval of the proposed LIP project. That may be as soon as February 19th, depending on the police. I don't want to do it the same night as the police chief, just because it's too much to jam in one meeting. And so we'll talk to them at the meeting next week and see, but that'll be in February or March for the Board of Selectmen review. Other thing, just one detail, we had decided, as part of this reorganization of responsibility for affordable housing, the Affordable Housing Trust Board took over as the members of the Medfield Community Development Corporation, which is the outfit that was created to develop Allendale. And after some discussion, a couple meetings, we decided that we're going to dissolve the Community Development Corporation, that there's no conceivable use for it on the front coming up. It had fallen out of compliance with the state. We brought it back into compliance with the state, and we're going to go through the process now, and then the remaining funds in the CDC will get transferred to the Affordable Housing Trust Board of Trustees, and then that'll be dissolved. I think there's been enough changes in everything. We just don't think it's likely that it's going to be used, and it's just sort of an existing entity that's not doing anything. And so I think that they're in the process of winding that up, which will then get the money transferred to the trust to be used for affordable housing development. So those are the updates on that front. I don't think I had anything else.
You sent out an email about the need to amend the bylaw for the Affordable Housing Trust. Do you propose an alternate to make up for that member that's?
No, just another one appointed by the selectmen, just eliminate it, yeah.
Okay.
So that's our town meeting article, because the original bylaw of the Affordable Housing Trust put a seat on the trust board for a member of the Affordable Housing Committee. That committee no longer exists, so they would just eliminate that automatic appointment. It would just be a regular appointment to the.
We'll just strike it. Oh, are you gonna drop the membership, or it's
No,
gonna?
it'll still be 7.
So who's gonna make the extra appointment
The
then?
selectmen make all the appointments.
So, so the selectmen will increase by 1 from what it is
Ones
now.
we appoint.
Right.
I mean, right now, we even appoint the Affordable Housing Committee member, but they're recommended by the Affordable Housing Committee.
Okay, but the number is gonna remain what it is
7.
then? Okay.
It's just gonna eliminate the fact that one of them has to be the member of a committee that does not exist anymore.
So will the current membership of that, the Affordable Housing Trust change?
I
that's-
believe the person who holds that seat, I believe her term is up this spring.
We'll have
Okay,
to look,
okay.
yeah.
And so
So,
we
okay,
we
he's a
can
reappoint.
decide whether to reappoint her or not.
Okay.
Anything else? Do you have a motion to, what is it, adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
All right.
Medfield TV, community shows.